Good day, lovely viewers. Welcome to Harry FLAX. We have an exciting story lined up for you today. What if the Goblin Nation blood-tested Harry at age 7 and revealed Dumbledore stole 26 billion from his vaults? Your engagement means the world to us. Like, comment, and subscribe to help us grow and bring you more amazing content. Without wasting any time, let's start. Chapter 1. The blood of inheritance. The sharp sting of Aunt Petunia's wooden spoon against his knuckles made 7-year-old Harry Potter wince, but he didn't cry out. Years at number 4 Privet Drive had taught him that showing pain only made things worse. I told you to watch the bacon. Now it's ruined, she hissed, her horse-like face contorted with anger. Vernon works hard to put food on this table, and you waste it. Harry stared at the slightly crispy bacon. It wasn't even burned, just darker than Uncle Vernon preferred. Sorry, Aunt Petunia. I'll eat the burned pieces. You'll eat nothing until you finish your chores. All of them. She thrust a list at him that seemed longer than his arm. And don't think you're getting any birthday presents tomorrow, not after this. Harry hadn't expected presents anyway. His birthdays passed like any other day, except with extra chores and pointed reminders of his parents' drunken car crash. Tomorrow would mark 7 years since he'd become the Dursleys' unwanted burden. After wolfing down a dry piece of toast while Dudley gorged on eggs, bacon, and pancakes, Harry headed outside to start on the garden. July heat pressed down on his small frame as he pulled weeds from Aunt Petunia's flower beds. His oversized clothes, Dudley's cast-offs, stuck to his skin, the sweat making his broken glasses slide down his nose every few minutes. By midday, he'd finished the garden and cleaned the shed. His stomach growled, but he knew better than to ask for lunch before finishing the list. The routine was familiar: work until you drop, eat whatever scraps remain, sleep in the cupboard under the stairs, repeat. Hey, Potter. Harry turned to see Dudley and his gang approaching from the park. His heart sank. With his cousin came the game they called Harry hunting, which usually ended with Harry bruised or bleeding. Thought you could hide from us? Piers Polkiss, Dudley's rat-faced friend, sneered. I'm not hiding. I'm doing chores, Harry replied, already backing away. Dudley cracked his knuckles. We're bored. And you know what that means. Harry bolted. Despite being smaller and chronically underfed, he was fast. Years of escaping Dudley had made sure of that. He darted between houses, jumped a fence, and raced toward the primary school, which was deserted during summer holiday. He'd almost reached the safety of the school's janitor's shed when Malcolm, one of Dudley's faster friends, tackled him from behind. Harry hit the ground hard, his glasses flying off his face. Got him! Malcolm shouted. Moments later, Dudley's gang surrounded him. Harry struggled to his feet, knowing what came next. Hold him, Dudley commanded, and Piers and Gordon grabbed Harry's arms. Something hot and angry bubbled inside Harry's chest as Dudley drew back his fist. It wasn't fair. It was never fair. The feeling intensified, a pressure building inside him like a shaken fizzy drink. Just as Dudley's fist swung toward his face, Harry shouted, "Stop!" A blast of invisible force erupted from him, throwing all 5 boys backward. They landed hard on the playground asphalt several meters away, looking dazed. Harry stood frozen, as shocked as they were. How had he done that? It wasn't the first strange thing that had happened around him, his hair growing back overnight after Aunt Petunia's disastrous haircut, somehow ending up on the school roof when running from Dudley, but it was the most dramatic. Dudley's face contorted with fear. Freak, he stammered, scrambling backward. Dad was right. You're a freak. The boys ran away, leaving Harry alone to retrieve his glasses. One lens had cracked completely, making the world even blurrier than usual. Great. Uncle Vernon would be furious. That was impressive. Harry whirled around to find a short man watching him from the shadow of the school building. He wore an odd suit that seemed slightly too formal for little whinging and had sharp, calculating eyes. Harry tensed, ready to run again. Adults rarely approached him, and when they did, the Dursleys made sure they never spoke to him twice. "Who are you?" "Someone who recognizes talent when he sees it." The man stepped forward, his movements precise and efficient. "You can do things others can't you, Mr. Potter?" Harry's eyes widened. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things." The man's smile revealed unusually pointed teeth. "My name is Steelclaw. I represent interested parties who have been looking for you." "Looking for me? Why?" "Nobody ever looked for Harry. Nobody wanted him. Because of what you just did." Steelclaw gestured toward where Dudley's gang had been flung. "And because of who your parents were." Harry's heart lurched. "My parents? But they died in a car crash." Steelclaw's expression hardened. "Is that what they told you?" "No, Mr. Potter. Your parents did not die in a car crash. They were murdered by a very powerful, very evil man. And you." His voice lowered. "You survived." The playground seemed to spin around Harry. "Murdered? But why would anyone murder them? And why would anyone look for me?" "Those are excellent questions that deserve proper answers." Steelclaw glanced around. "But not here. Meet me tomorrow morning at the corner of Magnolia Crescent. 7 o'clock. I'll tell you everything about your parents, your inheritance, and what makes you so special." Harry hesitated. This could be a trap or a cruel joke. But something in Steelclaw's eyes convinced him the man was serious. And the mention of his parents, how could he refuse? "I don't know if I can get away. My aunt and uncle will not notice your absence," Steelclaw finished. "Trust me on this, Mr. Potter. 7 o'clock. He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and happy birthday in advance." Harry stood in the deserted playground long after Steelclaw disappeared, his mind racing. Someone knew about his parents, really knew them. Someone recognized that he was different, not just a freak. And for the first time, his birthday might actually bring something worth having, the truth. Harry barely slept that night. Uncle Vernon had indeed been furious about the glasses, locking Harry in his cupboard without dinner. But for once, Harry didn't care about the punishment or the gnawing hunger. His mind buzzed with questions about his parents, about what made him special, about the mysterious Steelclaw. Morning came with the usual rapping on his cupboard door. "Up. Get up. Cook breakfast." Aunt Petunia's shrill voice commanded. Harry rubbed his eyes and checked the broken Mickey Mouse watch he'd salvaged from Dudley's trash. 6:15, he needed to hurry if he wanted to meet Steelclaw at 7. Breakfast preparation went faster than usual with Harry's newfound determination. By 6:50, the Dursleys were seated at the table, and Harry was wiping down the counters. "I'm going to start on the outside chores," he announced casually. Uncle Vernon grunted without looking up from his newspaper. Aunt Petunia waved him away dismissively. Neither cared where he went as long as chores got done and neighbors didn't complain. Heart pounding, Harry slipped out the front door and ran toward Magnolia Crescent. The morning air felt electric with possibility. He reached the corner at exactly 7, breathing hard, and found Steelclaw waiting. Today, the man wore an even stranger outfit, something like a banker's suit but with odd metallic embellishments. Up close, Harry noticed other peculiarities: slightly pointed ears, unusually long fingers, and those teeth that seemed too sharp. "Right on time, Mr. Potter." "Excellent." Steelclaw nodded approvingly. "We have much to accomplish today." "Where are we going?" Harry asked, falling into step beside him. "London. To a place called Diagon Alley, where your questions will be answered." Steelclaw led him toward the bus stop. "But first, we need to address your appearance. Those clothes won't do, and we must fix those glasses." Harry touched his tape-together frames self-consciously. I don't have any money. That, Steelclaw said with a knowing smile, is where you're most mistaken. The bus ride to London passed in a blur of anticipation. Steelclaw kept conversation minimal, occasionally asking Harry about the Dursleys and his life with them. Each answer made the strange man's expression darken. "They keep you in a cupboard?" he asked at one point, his voice dangerously soft. Harry nodded, suddenly embarrassed. "It's not so bad. There aren't any spiders in it anymore. Not since I asked them to leave." Steelclaw's eyebrows shot up. "You spoke to spiders?" "Not exactly spoke. I just wished they'd go away, and they did." Harry shrugged. "Stuff like that happens sometimes." "Fascinating," Steelclaw murmured. "Your magic manifests in unusual ways." "Magic?" Harry's eyes widened. "That's what it is. The weird stuff." "Indeed. You, Mr. Potter, are a wizard. As were your parents before you." The words hit Harry like a physical blow. "A wizard? But that's impossible." "Hardly. You've seen the evidence yourself." Steelclaw leaned closer. "How else could you have thrown those boys without touching them? How could you speak to spiders or regrow your hair overnight?" Harry stared at him. "How do you know about my hair?" "As I said, we've been watching. Not closely enough, it seems." The last part he muttered to himself. The bus reached central London, and Steelclaw led Harry through crowded streets to a shabby-looking pub sandwiched between a bookshop and a record store. Oddly, the people walking past didn't seem to notice it, their eyes slid from the bookshop to the record store as if the pub didn't exist. "The Leaky Cauldron," Steelclaw announced. "Gateway to Diagon Alley." Inside, the pub was dark and somewhat grimy. People in strange robes and pointed hats sat drinking from heavy mugs. Several nodded to Steelclaw, who returned the gestures curtly. "Is Mr. Steelclaw your real name?" Harry whispered as they passed through. The man gave a short, barking laugh. "It's the name humans can pronounce. I am what wizards call a goblin, though I've taken a human glamour for today's excursion." "A goblin?" Harry's eyes grew even wider. "Like, from fairy tales?" "Your fairy tales get most things wrong," Steelclaw replied dryly. "We are the bankers of the wizarding world, handlers of gold and guardians of treasure. And today, we're going to Gringotts Bank to discover yours." They exited through the pub's back door into a small, walled courtyard. Steelclaw approached the brick wall and tapped a specific pattern with what looked like a short, wooden stick. "Is that a magic wand?" Harry asked eagerly. "A temporary one. Goblins use different magic, but for appearances." He finished the pattern, and the brick wall began to move. Bricks shifted and rearranged themselves, creating an archway that opened onto the most extraordinary street Harry had ever seen. Colorful shops lined a cobblestone road that twisted and turned out of sight. People in robes hurried past, carrying packages wrapped in brown paper. Owls swooped overhead, and strange smells, sweet, spicy, and occasionally alarming, filled the air. "Welcome," said Steelclaw with a hint of pride, "to Diagon Alley." Harry couldn't speak. His eyes darted everywhere, trying to absorb everything at once, a shop with broomsticks in the window, another displaying bubbling cauldrons, a third with caged creatures that hooted and screeched. "This way, Mr. Potter. Gringotts first, shopping later." At the far end of the alley stood an imposing white building that towered over the neighboring shops. As they approached, Harry made out words engraved above the burnished bronze doors: "Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits. The sin of greed for those who take, but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn." Two short, uniformed figures with pointed ears and sharp features, goblins without human glamours, Harry realized, bowed them inside. Beyond the bronze doors lay a second pair made of silver, and beyond those, a vast marble hall. Hundreds of goblins worked at long counters, weighing coins on brass scales, examining jewels through eyeglasses, and scratching in ledgers with quills. Steelclaw strode confidently to the farthest counter, where an elderly goblin with spectacles perched on his long nose was examining a ruby the size of a golf ball. "Griphook," Steelclaw said in a formal tone, "I present to you Harry Potter, son of James and Lily, here for inheritance testing." The goblin named Griphook looked up sharply. His eyes found Harry's forehead, where a lightning bolt scar had resided since infancy. "Indeed." Griphook set down the ruby. "Follow me, Mr. Potter." They were led through a side door into a lavishly appointed office. A massive desk dominated the space, behind which sat the oldest goblin Harry had ever seen, though, admittedly, he'd only seen 3. Director Ragnarok, Steelclaw bowed deeply. "I present Harry Potter." Ragnarok studied Harry intently. "So. The missing heir appears at last. 7 years we've sent statements to your magical guardian, with no response. 7 years of irregularities in your accounts, with no one to question them." Harry shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't understand. What guardian? What accounts?" Ragnarok's eyes narrowed dangerously. "You know nothing of your inheritance? Your family vaults? The Potter legacy?" "No, sir. Until yesterday, I thought my parents died in a car crash." A string of harsh, guttural sounds erupted from Ragnarok, goblin curses, Harry guessed, from the way Steelclaw winced. "This is worse than we suspected," Ragnarok finally said in English. "Mr. Potter, do you consent to a blood test? It will verify your identity and reveal your full inheritance." Harry hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Yes. I want to know everything." Griphook produced a golden bowl and a small silver knife. 3 drops of blood, Mr. Potter. It won't hurt more than a pinprick." With steady hands, Harry allowed Griphook to prick his finger and guide 3 drops of blood into the bowl. The blood seemed to sizzle upon contact with the metal, then spread outward, forming intricate patterns that reminded Harry of tree branches. Ragnarok waved his hand over the bowl, and the blood patterns rose into the air, transforming into words and symbols that hung suspended above the desk. The 3 goblins read in silence, their expressions growing increasingly grave. "By Gringotts' sword," Ragnarok breathed. "The theft is even more extensive than our audit suggested." "Theft?" Harry leaned forward, trying to make sense of the floating symbols. "What theft?" Ragnarok's face contorted with anger. "Mr. Potter, according to this blood test, you are indeed Harry James Potter, sole heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter. Your family vault should contain approximately 31 billion galleons, wizard gold," he clarified, seeing Harry's confusion. "However, over the past 7 years, approximately 26 billion galleons have been systematically removed from your accounts." Harry struggled to comprehend the numbers. "But who, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore?" Ragnarok spat the name like poison. "Your self-appointed magical guardian, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards, and chief warlock of the Wizengamot. A powerful man," Steelclaw added. "Perhaps the most respected wizard in Britain. And a thief of the highest order," Griphook growled. "The transfers began the very night your parents died, Mr. Potter." Harry felt dizzy. This was too much: magic, goblins, billions in gold, and now some powerful wizard stealing from him. But why would he steal from me? And how could I have so much money? "The Potters are an ancient family," Ragnarok explained. "Your ancestors invented several widely used potions, including Skeelgrow and Sleekeasy's hair potion. The family investments span both magical and non-magical ventures. As for Dumbledore's motivations," he shrugged. "Power and control, perhaps. Or something more sinister." "The blood test reveals more," Griphook said, pointing to another section of the floating text. Multiple properties, Potter Manor in Wales, cottages in Godric's Hollow and Hogsmeade, a chateau in France, and more. All currently under Dumbledore's management. He's been living in your houses, spending your gold, and controlling your legacy, Steelclaw summarized. While you lived in a cupboard under the stairs. Harry's shock gave way to something hotter, sharper. For years, he'd accepted the Dursleys' narrative, that he was worthless, a burden, lucky to have a cupboard and table scraps. Now he learned that not only did he have parents who were murdered, not drunk drivers, but he was wealthy beyond imagination, and someone had stolen it all while leaving him in misery. "What can we do?" he asked, his voice steadier than he expected. Ragnar's eyes gleamed with approval at Harry's directness. "We act immediately. As the last Potter, you have certain rights even as a minor. With your permission, we can freeze all accounts, recall stolen assets, and invoke old magic that will prevent further theft." "Do it," Harry said without hesitation. "There will be consequences," Steelclaw warned. "Dumbledore won't take this lightly. He'll come looking for you. Let him." Something cold and determined settled in Harry's chest. "He left me with people who hate me. He stole from me. I'm not afraid of him." Ragnar nodded sharply. "Griphook, prepare the inheritance ritual. Steelclaw, contact our allies in the Ministry. We'll need to move quickly before Dumbledore realizes what's happening." The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harry signed documents with a quill that used his own blood as ink, cementing his claim to the Potter vaults. Griphook gave him a detailed accounting of his assets, or what remained of them, while Steelclaw explained basics of wizard law and politics. "Dumbledore placed you with those muggles, non-magical people, against your parents' wishes," Steelclaw explained. "There will specifically name Sirius Black as your guardian, with Alice Longbottom as an alternative." "Then why?" "Black was imprisoned for betraying your parents to Voldemort, the dark wizard who killed them. And the Longbottoms were attacked shortly after, leaving them permanently damaged." Steelclaw's expression grew thoughtful. "Though our investigations suggest Black never received a proper trial. Curious timing, that." By mid-afternoon, Harry's head spun with names, facts, and figures. Ragnar finally called a halt to the proceedings. "You need rest, Mr. Potter. And you need safety. Dumbledore will soon discover you're missing from Privet Drive, if he hasn't already. We've prepared Potter Haven for your use, a property unknown to Dumbledore, as it's under Fidelius' charm with Gringotts as secret keeper." "What's a Fidelius charm?" Harry asked. "A powerful spell that hides a location completely unless the secret keeper reveals it to you," Griphook explained. "Even if Dumbledore stood right outside, he couldn't see it, enter it, or even remember it exists." A thought struck Harry. "What about my things at Privet Drive?" The goblins exchanged glances. "What things do you value there?" Ragnar asked. Harry considered. His few possessions consisted of Dudley's cast-offs, broken toys rescued from the trash, and a single baby blanket he'd hidden under a loose floorboard, the only thing he had from his parents. "Just a blanket under the floor in my cupboard. It's blue with my initials." Ragnar nodded to Steelclaw, who disappeared immediately. "He'll retrieve it. Meanwhile, let's get you suitable clothing and a new pair of glasses." 2 hours later, Harry barely recognized himself in the mirror of Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. Gone were Dudley's enormous cast-offs, replaced by properly fitted wizarding robes and Muggle-style clothes. His new glasses, enchanted to adjust to his vision without prescription, made the world crisp and clear for the first time in memory. His perpetually messy hair had been cut by a barber who claimed to specialize in Potter-type hair. "Much better," Ragnar approved. "Now you look like the Potter heir." Their final stop was Flourish and Blots, where Ragnar selected a stack of books. "Basic magical theory, wizard customs, and Potter family history," he explained. "You have years of education to catch up on." As they left Diagon Alley, Harry noticed people beginning to stare, whispering and pointing at his forehead. Word was spreading. Steelclaw hurried them through the leaky cauldron and into a black car with darkened windows that waited outside. "Your blanket," Steelclaw said, handing over the blue fabric with HJP embroidered in the corner. "The Dursleys didn't notice my entry. They seemed distracted by some prize Muggle appliance they'd won in a contest they don't remember entering." Ragnar's smile showed too many teeth. "A convenient distraction we arranged. They'll be occupied for days." The car drove through London's evening traffic, eventually turning onto a country road that seemed to twist in impossible ways. Just when Harry thought he might be sick from the winding journey, they stopped before wrought iron gates that appeared from nowhere. "Potter Haven," Ragnar announced. "Your sanctuary until matters are settled." The gates opened at Harry's approach, revealing a modest but elegant manor house surrounded by gardens and a small forest. It wasn't ostentatious like the Dursleys' aspirational magazine homes, but welcoming, as if it had waited for him. Inside, Harry discovered a house elf named Tippy who burst into tears at the sight of him. "Young Master Potter has come home. Tippy has waited and waited, keeping everything ready." The creature threw itself at Harry's feet, sobbing with joy. Over a dinner that made the Hogwarts feasts Harry would later experience seem modest, Ragnar outlined next steps. "By morning, Dumbledore will know something's wrong. The account freezes, the property reclamations, he won't take it lightly. He'll search for you, claiming concern for your safety." Harry took a sip of pumpkin juice, another new experience. "Let him search. What can he do if he finds me? Legally? Less than he could yesterday. The blood test activated ancient Potter family magics, granting you certain protections. But practically, he's an extraordinarily powerful wizard with far-reaching influence." Ragnar's expression grew serious. "This won't be a simple matter of returning stolen gold. By challenging Dumbledore, we challenge the very power structure of Wizarding Britain." "Good." Harry set down his glass decisively. "He left me in that cupboard for 7 years. He stole my inheritance. Someone should challenge him." Ragnar studied Harry thoughtfully. "Most wizard children would be terrified. Yet you seem angry," Harry supplied. "I'm angry. All my life, the Dursleys told me I was nothing, a burden, unwanted. Now I find out I had parents who loved me, who made plans for me. I had a home, money, a future, and someone took it all away." His hands clenched into fists on the table. "I want it back. All of it." The Goblin director's face broke into a wide, frightening grin. "Spoken like a true goblin, Mr. Potter." He raised his goblet. "To reclamation and justice." Harry raised his own glass. "To reclamation and justice." In a castle far to the north, alarms began to sound in the headmaster's office. Albus Dumbledore looked up from his correspondence, frowning at the silver instruments that had begun to spin and whistle on his desk. "Curious," he murmured, rising to inspect them. One by one, the devices sputtered and went still. The blood wards at Privet Drive had fallen. The monitoring charms on Harry Potter had disappeared. And most alarmingly, the connections to the Potter vaults, connections that funded various initiatives too sensitive for official Hogwarts or Ministry accounts, had vanished completely. Dumbledore's usual twinkling benevolence faded, replaced by something colder and harder. "Fawkes," he addressed the phoenix perched near his desk, "I believe we have a problem." The magnificent bird trilled a note that sounded remarkably like agreement. Dumbledore strode to his fireplace and threw in a handful of powder. "Arabella Fig," he called into the green flames. Moments later, the face of an elderly woman appeared. "Headmaster. I was just about to call you." "Something strange has happened, Harry Potter," Dumbledore interrupted. "Is he still at Privet Drive?" "Well, that's just it," Mrs. Fig replied nervously. "The Dursleys are acting oddly, celebrating some prize they've won. I haven't seen Harry all day, which isn't unusual with his chores, but something feels wrong. The air around the house is different somehow. Dumbledore's expression darkened further. I'm coming through. Step back. Minutes later, he stood on Privet Drive, disillusioned to avoid Muggle notice. The blood wards that should have surrounded number 4 were indeed gone, not weakened, not damaged, but completely dismantled as if they'd never existed. He cast detection spells, searching for traces of Harry's magic, but found nothing recent. A conversation with the oblivious Dursleys, who seemed uninterested in their nephew's absence, yielded no useful information. Vernon merely grunted that the boy was probably hiding somewhere to avoid chores, while Petunia fretted about their new microwave's programming features. Back at Hogwarts, Dumbledore paced his office. This was a disaster decades in the making. Harry Potter, the linchpin of his carefully crafted plans, the child whose destiny he had mapped with such precision, had vanished. Worse, the financial resources he'd diverted for the greater good were suddenly beyond reach. Who could have found him, he muttered. Who would dare interfere? An owl swooped through his window, dropping a heavy envelope on his desk before departing without waiting for a reply, unusual behavior for most postal owls. The envelope bore the Gringotts seal. With growing apprehension, Dumbledore broke it open to find a formal notice. To Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, this letter serves as official notification that all access to Potter family vaults, properties, and assets has been revoked, effective immediately. Blood-verified heir Harry James Potter has claimed his inheritance rights and initiated a full audit of all accounts under Gringotts jurisdiction. Preliminary findings indicate unauthorized transfers totaling approximately 26 billion galleons over 7 years. Under Goblin Banking Code Section 493b, all assets connected to these transfers have been frozen pending investigation. Representatives from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement will contact you regarding potential criminal charges. May your gold flow and your enemies fall, Director Ragnar Gringotts Wizarding Bank. Dumbledore sank into his chair, the letter trembling in his hand. This wasn't merely an inconvenience, it was catastrophic. Someone had taken Harry to Gringotts, authorized a blood test, and set in motion events that could destroy everything he'd worked for. The goblins, he realized. Of course. Non-human magical beings existed outside his sphere of influence. The goblins, in particular, operated with near autonomy in financial matters, and they'd never approved of his handling of the Potter accounts, a situation he'd managed through careful political maneuvering and occasional magical persuasion. But why act now, after 7 years? What had changed? A second owl arrived, this one bearing the ministry seal. The message inside was brief but devastating. Emergency session of the Wizengamot called for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Attendance mandatory. Subject: Guardianship of Harry Potter and allegations of financial impropriety. Dumbledore closed his eyes, his mind racing through options. This had spiraled beyond a simple retrieval mission. The political damage alone would take months to repair. And Harry, impressionable, malleable Harry, was now beyond his guidance, possibly being filled with who knew what ideas. Everything had been so carefully planned. The boy was supposed to arrive at Hogwarts humble, grateful for rescue from his Muggle relatives, eager for guidance and mentorship. Isolated from wizarding politics and ignorant of his heritage, Harry would have looked to Dumbledore as the ultimate authority figure, exactly as needed for the trials ahead. Now that plan lay in ruins. Adaptability, Albus, he reminded himself. You've navigated worse. He began drafting letters to his allies in the Wizengamot. The goblin accusations would need to be countered with confusion rather than denial. The missing funds could be explained as necessary security measures for the boy who lived. And Harry himself, well, a frightened child would surely want to return to familiar surroundings once the excitement wore off. Dumbledore paused in his writing, a new thought occurring to him. Perhaps this development, troubling as it was, offered opportunities. A more worldly, financially independent Harry might actually be useful, provided that independence could be properly channeled. Yes, he decided, this could still work. Plans could be adjusted. The boy's destiny remained unchanged, only the path required rerouting. With renewed purpose, Dumbledore returned to his correspondence. The Wisengamot session tomorrow would be challenging, but manageable. Harry Potter would be found and returned to proper influence. The greater good would prevail, as it must. The Phoenix watched its master with unreadable eyes, trilling a soft, ambiguous note that went unheeded. Harry woke to sunlight streaming through curtains finer than anything he'd ever slept under. For a disorienting moment, he thought he was dreaming, the four-poster bed, the spacious bedroom decorated in blues and bronzes, the magical paintings whose occupants actually moved and spoke. Then yesterday's events came rushing back. The Goblin, the bank, the blood test, the stolen billions. This wasn't a dream, it was his new reality. Young Master is awake. Tippy appeared with a crack, beaming at Harry. Breakfast is ready downstairs when Master wishes to eat. Thanks, Tippy. Harry climbed out of bed, still marveling at the silk pajamas he'd slept in. Is Director Ragnarok still here? Director left late last night but says he returns this morning with important news. Tippy helped Harry select clothes from a wardrobe that had mysteriously filled with items in his size overnight. Tippy has prepared Master's favorites. Harry didn't have the heart to tell Tippy he had no idea what his favorites were, the Dursleys had never asked, and his meals there had been determined by whatever Dudley didn't want. Breakfast turned out to be a feast, eggs prepared 3 ways, crispy bacon, fluffy pancakes, fresh fruit, and pumpkin juice. Harry sampled everything, discovering flavors he'd never experienced. He was halfway through his meal when Ragnarok arrived, accompanied by Griphook and a witch with a monocle and stern expression. Mr. Potter, this is Madame Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Ragnarok introduced. She has questions about your situation. Harry straightened in his chair. Good morning, Madame Bones. The witch studied him intently. Mr. Potter. Remarkable. You have your mother's eyes, but the rest is James through and through. She took a seat across from him. I knew your parents, you see. Worked with them briefly during the war. You did? Harry leaned forward eagerly. Could you tell me about them sometime? Something in Madame Bones's stern face softened. I'd be delighted. But first, we have pressing matters to discuss. Director Ragnarok has presented evidence of significant financial irregularities involving your inheritance. He stole from me, Harry said plainly. Dumbledore took my money and left me with people who made me sleep in a cupboard. Madame Bones's eyebrows shot up. A cupboard? Under the stairs. It was my bedroom until yesterday. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as Madame Bones processed this information. I see. And were there other concerns about your home life? Harry hesitated, suddenly self-conscious. The Dursleys' treatment had been his normal for so long that articulating it felt strange. They didn't like me much. Aunt Petunia called me freak instead of my name. Uncle Vernon yelled a lot. Dudley, that's my cousin, beat me up whenever he could catch me. I did all the chores from the time I could reach the stove. They didn't feed me much. Each sentence landed like a physical blow. Madame Bones's face grew increasingly rigid, while Ragnarok and Griphook exchanged dark looks. And Albus Dumbledore placed you there? Madame Bones asked, her voice carefully controlled. That's what Director Ragnarok said. I never met Dumbledore before. Yet he appointed himself your magical guardian, controlled your finances, and managed your properties, she summarized. All while you lived in conditions that violate multiple Ministry child protection statutes. Harry nodded, surprised that wizard laws protected children. The Dursleys had certainly never worried about such things. This complicates matters, Madame Bones said to Ragnarok. Financial impropriety is one thing. Child endangerment is quite another. The Wisengamot session today will be more volatile than anticipated. Wisengamot? Harry asked. Wizard government, Griphook explained. They're meeting this morning to discuss your situation. Dumbledore, as Chief Warlock, would normally preside, but given the circumstances, he's been temporarily suspended from that role, Madam Bones finished. Which brings me to my next question, Mr. Potter. What do you want to happen now? Harry blinked, startled by the question. Adults rarely asked what he wanted. I don't want to go back to the Dursleys. And I want my parents' money returned. That's clear enough. But regarding your guardianship, can I stay here? With Tippy? Harry glanced at the house elf, who had been hovering anxiously nearby. This was my family's house, right? It feels right. Madam Bones exchanged looks with Ragnarok. There are options we can explore. In cases of last heirs to ancient houses, there are precedents for early emancipation under ministry supervision. Given the circumstances, I believe we could make a compelling case. What does emancipation mean? Harry asked. It means you would legally be considered an adult in certain matters, though you'd still have ministry-appointed advisors until you reach majority, Ragnarok explained. You could make decisions about your properties and finances, for instance. I'd like that, Harry said firmly. I don't want anyone controlling my life again. Madam Bones nodded, seemingly satisfied. I'll present this position to the Wisengamot. Director Ragnarok will attend as representative of Gringotts' interests. You, Mr. Potter, should remain here under protection until matters are settled. As they prepared to leave, Harry asked, what will happen to Dumbledore? That depends on many factors, Madam Bones replied carefully. The evidence of financial misconduct is substantial, but Dumbledore has considerable political power and public support. He may claim the funds were used for your protection or other seemingly noble purposes. But they weren't, Harry said. I wasn't protected. I was miserable. Yes. Madam Bones's expression hardened. And that, Mr. Potter, may prove to be Albus Dumbledore's greatest miscalculation. After they departed, Harry explored Potter Haven with Tippy as his enthusiastic guide. The house wasn't enormous, nothing like the palaces in Dudley's fairy tale books, but it felt spacious and welcoming. Every room contained some connection to his family, photographs of smiling people who shared his features, books with "Property of James Potter" scribbled inside covers, a music box that Tippy claimed had been Lily Potter's childhood treasure. In the library, Harry discovered a portrait of an elderly couple who introduced themselves as Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, his grandparents. Harry! Fleamont's painted figure exclaimed. Merlin's beard, you've grown. Last we saw you, you were learning to walk. You look just like James, Euphemia added warmly. But those eyes, my mother's, Harry finished, having heard this several times now. You knew her? Of course. Brilliant witch, your mother. Brightest of her age. And she kept James on his toes, which was no small feat, Fleamont chuckled. Where are James and Lily? We've been in storage for ages, it seems. Harry's heart sank. The portrait didn't know. They died. When I was a baby. A dark wizard killed them. The painted figures froze in shock. Dead? Euphemia whispered. Our James. And Lily too. I'm sorry, Harry said softly. I just found out myself yesterday. I've been living with Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon. They told me my parents died in a car crash. Petunia Dursley. Fleamont's expression darkened. That spiteful, magic-hating woman. Why in Merlin's name would you be placed with her? Dumbledore put me there, Harry explained. He's been stealing from the family vaults too. The goblins found out yesterday. What followed was a crash course in Potter family history and wizard politics from two people who, though merely enchanted paint and canvas, retained the knowledge and personalities of his grandparents. They explained the old alliance between Potters and Goblins, dating back to when Fleamont's father had argued for Goblin rights in the Wizengamot. They told him about his father's friendship with Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, and expressed disbelief that Sirius could have betrayed James. Impossible, Fleamont declared. Those boys were closer than brothers. Sirius lived with us for years after his family disowned him. He would have died before betraying James. Director Ragnarok said Sirius never got a proper trial, Harry mentioned. Euphemia's portrait frowned. That makes no sense. Even during the war, there were trial procedures. Unless. Fleamont, you don't think, Dumbledore, her husband finished. If he wanted control of Harry, Sirius would have been an obstacle. The Potter would have named him guardian. But why would Dumbledore want to control me? Harry asked. And why steal so much money? The portraits exchanged glances. Power takes many forms, Harry, Fleamont said. Gold is one. Influence over the boy who lived, the child who somehow defeated the darkest wizard of the age, that's another kind entirely. The conversation was interrupted by Tippy announcing lunch, followed by the return of Griphook, who arrived alone with news from the Wizengamot. Chaos, the Goblin reported with evident satisfaction. Complete political chaos. Madam Bones presented the evidence, financial records, your living conditions, the contradictions to your parents' will. Half the chamber demanded Dumbledore's immediate arrest. The other half called for investigation before action. What did Dumbledore say? Harry asked. He claimed all actions were taken for your protection. The funds were diverted to secure properties, hire guards, and maintain blood wards at Privet Drive. Griphook sneered. When questioned about your cupboard and treatment, he expressed shock and claimed no knowledge, suggesting he'd been misled about your conditions. That's a lie, Harry said flatly. There were never any guards. And if he didn't know how they treated me, it's because he never checked. Not once in 7 years. Precisely Madam Bones's point, Griphook agreed. The session adjourned with 3 major outcomes. An investigation committee will audit all diverted funds, your emancipation case will be reviewed by the Family Affairs Department, and most importantly, here Griphook grinned wickedly, Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended from all positions pending investigation. Harry absorbed this, trying to imagine what it meant for his future. So what happens now? Now. Griphook's grin widened. Now we prepare for war, Mr. Potter. Not with wands and curses, but with ledgers and laws. Dumbledore will fight to regain control, of you, of the narrative, of his positions. Our job is to ensure he fails. Harry nodded, a matching determination rising inside him. Where do we start? The rest of the day passed in lessons on wizard law, Potter family history, and basic magical theory. Griphook proved a demanding but effective teacher, drilling Harry on information he would need in the coming weeks. By evening, Harry's head buzzed with new knowledge, from the structure of the Wizengamot to the basics of magical inheritance. When Tippy announced dinner, Harry was startled to find additional guests waiting in the dining room, a stern-looking elderly woman and a round-faced boy about Harry's age. Mr. Potter, Griphook introduced, may I present Augusta Longbottom and her grandson, Neville. The Longbottoms and Potters have been allies for generations. Augusta Longbottom surveyed Harry with a critical eye. Indeed we have. Your father and Neville's were best friends from childhood, just as their fathers were before them. Her gaze softened slightly. You look remarkably like James. But with my mother's eyes, Harry finished with a small smile. I've been hearing that a lot today. Gran, the boy, Neville, whispered urgently, it's really him. Of course it's him, child. I told you we were meeting Harry Potter. Augusta's tone was brisk but not unkind. Now remember your manners. Neville stepped forward nervously. Hello. I'm Neville. It's an honor to meet you. Harry extended his hand, feeling strange being treated with such formality by someone his own age. Just Harry, please. It's nice to meet you too, Neville. I didn't know our parents were friends. Few know the full extent of the connections between your families, Augusta said as they took their seats for dinner. Albus Dumbledore has been quite thorough in controlling information about you, Mr. Potter. I'm learning that, Harry replied. Did you attend the Wizengamot session today? I did. Augusta's expression hardened. A disgraceful affair. Whatever Dumbledore's intentions, his actions were inexcusable. Frank and Alice would be furious to know how you've been treated. Frank and Alice? Harry asked. Neville's parents, she explained, her voice catching slightly. They were attacked shortly after your parents' murder. They're alive, but permanently injured. St. Mungo's Hospital has cared for them these past 7 years. Harry glanced at Neville, who was studying his plate intently. Another orphan, in a way. Another child affected by the same war that had taken Harry's parents. I'm sorry, he said quietly to Neville. About your parents. Neville looked up, surprised by the sincere sympathy. Thanks. I visit them, but they don't know who I am. An understanding passed between the boys, something Augusta Longbottom noted with approval. The Potter and Longbottom heirs, together again, she murmured. As it should be. Over dinner, Augusta explained her presence. As a member of the investigation committee and a representative of an allied family, she would help oversee Harry's case for emancipation. The process normally takes months, but given the circumstances and the Goblin Nation's involvement, we expect an expedited resolution, she said. In the meantime, you'll need education. Proper wizard education, not that muggle nonsense. Gran hired tutors for me, Neville offered shyly. They could teach you too. An excellent suggestion, Griphook agreed. Joint lessons would benefit both young lords. Harry perked up at this. Lords. The Potters and Longbottoms are ancient and noble houses, Augusta explained. As last heirs, you both hold hereditary Wizengamot seats, though you cannot claim them until age 15. Until then, they're held in proxy, yours by Dumbledore, until yesterday. Who has it now? Harry asked. Currently. No one. Part of your emancipation hearing will determine who serves as your proxy. Augusta's expression suggested she had opinions on the matter. The conversation continued through dessert, ranging from wizard politics to more light-hearted topics like Quidditch, which Harry knew nothing about, and magical plants, which Neville described with unexpected confidence. By the time the Longbottoms departed, with plans for Neville to return for joint lessons, Harry felt he'd made his first real friend. They seem nice, he told Griphook as they reviewed the day's events in the library. Especially Neville. The Longbottoms are valuable allies, Griphook agreed. Augusta wields significant political power, and young Neville, while seemingly timid, comes from a line of formidable wizards. Harry nodded, turning his attention back to the book of magical theory he'd been studying. Griphook? Do you think I could try some magic? Real magic, with a wand? The Goblin considered this. Technically, underage magic is restricted. However, Potter Haven exists under old wards that confuse the Ministry's detection systems. And as you're in the process of emancipation. He smiled slyly. I see no reason why we couldn't arrange a preliminary wand. Not your permanent one, that should wait for Ollivanders, but something functional for basic training. Harry grinned, excitement bubbling inside him. 7 years of being called freak for accidental magic, and now he would learn to control it, to use it properly. When? He asked eagerly. Tomorrow, Griphook promised. We'll bring a wand maker who specializes in temporary training wands. And then, Mr. Potter, your real education begins. That night, lying in his new bed, Harry reflected on how completely his life had changed in just 2 days. From a cupboard to a manor house. From unwanted burden to heir of an ancient family. From powerless child to wizard in training. All because a disguised goblin had noticed him in a playground and decided to investigate. Reclamation and justice, he whispered, remembering his toast with Ragnarok. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Dumbledore, the Wizengamot, his eventual return to the wider wizarding world, Harry felt ready to face them. For the first time in his life, he had something worth fighting for, his heritage, his future, his freedom. Sleep came easily, and for once, his dreams were not of cupboards and darkness, but of magic and possibility. Chapter 2, Shattered Trust. Harry woke to sunlight streaming through curtains and the soft pop of Tippy appearing beside his bed. For a split second, he thought he was back at the Dursleys and tensed, expecting Aunt Petunia's shrill voice demanding breakfast. "Good morning, young Master Potter. Tippy has breakfast ready whenever Master wishes to eat." Reality snapped back into place. He wasn't in his cupboard. He was at Potter Haven, in his family home, with a house elf who practically vibrated with excitement at serving him. "Morning, Tippy." Harry stretched, still marveling at the softness of the bed. "I'll be down in a few minutes." The bathroom attached to his bedroom still amazed him, gleaming fixtures, fluffy towels, and hot water that didn't run out after Dudley's hour-long showers. After washing and dressing in clothes that actually fit, Harry headed downstairs, following the smell of bacon and pancakes. He found Griphook already at the breakfast table, surrounded by parchments. "Good morning, Mr. Potter. I trust you slept well." "Better than ever," Harry admitted, sliding into his seat as Tippy served a plate piled high with food. "What's all this?" "The initial findings from our audit." Griphook's sharp teeth gleamed as he smiled. Dumbledore was systematic in his theft, but not particularly creative. "We've already traced 14 shell companies and 29 property transfers." Harry speared a bite of pancake. "Shell companies? Fake businesses created to hide money. Dumbledore established them in both magical and muggle worlds." Griphook shuffled through his papers. "Ah, here's an interesting one, Greater Good Foundation for Magical Advancement. Sounds noble, doesn't it?" In reality, it funded the renovation of his brother's pub in Hogsmeade and paid stipends to several Order of the Phoenix members. Order of the Phoenix? Dumbledore's private militia during the war. Some were genuine heroes, others. Griphook's expression soured. Others were handsomely rewarded for their loyalty to Albus, not the cause. Harry chewed thoughtfully. Where did the rest of the money go? Political bribes disguised as charitable donations. Experimental magic research. Foreign investments. And a surprising amount to muggle businesses fronted by wizards. Griphook tapped another document. "The man has been building a financial empire using your gold, Mr. Potter. Can we get it back?" "Much of it, yes. Some has been spent, but Gringotts has already frozen assets totaling approximately 18 billion galleons. Properties are being reclaimed as we speak." The amount still staggered Harry. Even after a day of hearing about his wealth, he couldn't grasp the scale. From nothing to billions overnight. "When do I start magic lessons?" he asked, eager to change the subject from money to something more exciting. Griphook checked a pocket watch. "The wand maker arrives at 10. After that, your magical education begins in earnest." True to his word, at 10 o'clock, Griphook led Harry to the manor study where a thin, dark-haired woman waited. She carried a leather case and eyed Harry with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Potter, this is Madame Shafiq. She specializes in training wands for young wizards." The woman bowed slightly. "An honor, Mr. Potter. I've brought several options for you to try." She opened her case, revealing a dozen wands nestled in velvet. "Training wands differ from permanent wands," she explained, lifting a pale, smooth wand. "They're less powerful but more forgiving for beginners. They help develop proper technique before you bond with your true wand at Ollivander's. She handed him the pale wand. Ash and unicorn hair, 10 inches. Give it a wave. Harry took it, feeling foolish. He flicked it toward an empty vase. Nothing happened. Not that one. She snatched it back and handed him another. Maple and phoenix feather, 9 inches. This time when Harry waved it, the vase shattered explosively. Definitely not. Madame Shafiq repaired the vase with her own wand. After trying 7 wands with increasingly alarming results, including one that set Griphook's parchments on fire, Harry took a deep mahogany wand with intricate carvings along its length. The moment his fingers closed around it, warmth spread up his arm. When he waved it, golden sparks showered from the tip. Fascinating, Madame Shafiq murmured. Mahogany and dragon heartstring, 11 inches. Rather like your father's wand in composition, though his was paired with a different dragon. This should serve you well until you're ready for Ollivander's. After she left, Griphook began Harry's first formal magic lesson. Magic requires 3 components, the Goblin explained. Intent, focus, and power. You have power in abundance, Mr. Potter. Our task is to develop your focus and refine your intent. He placed a feather on the desk. We'll begin with Wingardium Leviosa, a basic levitation charm. The wand movement is swish and flick, like so. He demonstrated with his long fingers. For the next hour, Harry practiced the wand movement and pronunciation until Griphook deemed them acceptable. Then came the moment of truth. Wingardium Leviosa, Harry said, swishing and flicking at the feather. It shot toward the ceiling like a rocket, stuck there momentarily, then floated down gently. Enthusiastic, but effective, Griphook remarked dryly. Again, with more control. By lunchtime, Harry could levitate the feather to any height he chose and move it in simple patterns. The feeling of controlled magic flowing through him was intoxicating, so different from the accidental bursts that had earned him punishments at the Dursleys. You have a natural aptitude, Griphook said as they ate lunch. Not surprising given your parentage. Both Lily and James Potter were magically gifted. Harry beamed at the praise. What's next? Color-changing charm this afternoon. Tomorrow, young Longbottom joins us, and your formal education expands to include wizard history, politics, and etiquette. Harry groaned at etiquette, but his enthusiasm for learning magic outweighed any reluctance about the other subjects. After lunch, as Harry mastered turning a handkerchief from white to blue and back again, Tippy announced visitors. Director Ragnock and Madam Bones have arrived, Master Harry. Griphook immediately set aside their lesson. Important news, I suspect. They found Ragnock and Amelia Bones in the main sitting room. The witch's expression was grimmer than during her previous visit. Mr. Potter, she greeted him. I apologize for interrupting your studies, but we've uncovered information requiring immediate attention. What's happened? Harry asked, taking a seat across from them. Ragnock laid a folder on the coffee table. Our investigation expanded beyond finances to other irregularities. Among them, the matter of Sirius Black. My father's friend? The one who supposedly betrayed them? Supposedly is precisely the word, Madam Bones said. I reviewed ministry records personally. Sirius Black was sent to Azkaban, our prison, without a trial. Without a trial? Harry repeated. How is that legal? It isn't. Madam Bones's monocle flashed angrily. In the chaos following Voldemort's defeat, normal procedures were overlooked. According to the official record, the evidence against Black was overwhelming. He was found at the scene, laughing maniacally, surrounded by destruction and 12 dead muggles. But? Harry prompted, sensing there was more. But there was no interrogation under Veritaserum, our truth serum. No examination of his wand. No testimony taken. She straightened her monocle. As head of the DMLE, I've ordered a review of the case and a proper hearing. When? Next week, after we gather all available evidence. If Black is innocent, he spent 7 years in prison unjustly. If guilty. She shrugged. Then justice was served, albeit improperly. And Dumbledore knew about this? Harry asked. As Chief Warlock, he signed the order for Black's incarceration, Ragnarok confirmed. Harry's stomach twisted. The man had stolen his inheritance, left him with abusive relatives, and potentially imprisoned his godfather without a trial. What kind of person did such things? There's more, Madam Bones said quietly. The Daily Prophet has gotten wind of the investigation. Tomorrow's headline concerns you, Mr. Potter. I brought an advance copy. She handed him a newspaper. Across the top in massive letters, Boy Who Lived Found, Potter heir claims Dumbledore stole billions. Below was a photo of Harry from yesterday's trip to Diagon Alley. He hadn't even noticed a photographer. The article began, in a shocking development that has rocked the wizarding world, Harry Potter, the boy who lived, has emerged from obscurity to level staggering accusations against Albus Dumbledore, widely regarded as the greatest wizard of our time. Potter, now 7 years old, underwent a Gringotts inheritance test that revealed systemic theft from the Potter vaults totaling approximately 26 billion galleons over 7 years. Dumbledore, who appointed himself Potter's magical guardian despite contrary instructions in the Potter will, allegedly diverted these funds through dozens of shell companies and questionable investments. More disturbing still are reports that Dumbledore placed young Potter with magic-hating Muggle relatives who subjected him to years of mistreatment, including forcing the heir of the ancient and noble house of Potter to sleep in a cupboard under the stairs. The evidence of financial impropriety is irrefutable, says a Gringotts source who requested anonymity. Director Ragnarok has personally overseen the audit and recovery process. Madam Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, confirmed an ongoing investigation. We take these allegations extremely seriously, Bones stated. The misappropriation of funds from a minor's inheritance is a serious crime, as is child endangerment. Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended from his positions as Chief Warlock and Supreme Mugwump pending investigation. He remains headmaster of Hogwarts, though the Board of Governors has called an emergency meeting to review his status. For his part, Potter has been moved to a secure location with ministry approval while his case for early emancipation proceeds under ancient laws concerning last heirs of noble houses. When reached for comment, Dumbledore expressed deep concern for Harry's welfare and claimed all actions were taken for the greater good and protection of the boy who lived. He declined to address specific financial allegations. The article continued for 2 more pages, detailing Dumbledore's rise to power, speculating about the greater good justification, and recounting what little was publicly known about the night Harry's parents died. This changes things, Griphook said when Harry finished reading. The public will take sides. The owls are already pouring in, Madam Bones confirmed. The ministry has redirected your mail to a secure screening facility. Most are well wishes, some offer assistance or alliances, and a concerning number contain tracking charms and port keys. Tracking charms? Harry asked. Spells that would reveal your location, Ragnarok explained. It seems many wish to find you, some with benign intentions, others less so. Dumbledore? He's made no direct attempt yet, Madam Bones said. But his allies have been unusually active. Severus Snape, a Hogwarts professor with connections to your past, attempted to access ministry records concerning your placement. Minerva McGonagall, deputy headmistress, inquired about your welfare through official channels. And unofficially, Ragnarok added, our sources report Dumbledore has called a meeting of his closest supporters at Hogwarts tonight. Harry considered this. So tomorrow everyone in the wizarding world will know what Dumbledore did. They'll know the allegations, Madam Bones corrected. Some will believe them instantly. Others will defend Dumbledore regardless of evidence. He's been a hero and leader for decades. But the facts are on our side, Ragnock said firmly. And facts, Mr. Potter, properly leveraged, are more powerful than any spell. After Bones and Ragnock left, Harry returned to his magic lessons with renewed determination. If Dumbledore was gathering supporters, Harry needed every advantage he could get. By dinner time, he'd mastered basic color-changing charms and made progress on simple transfiguration, turning matchsticks into needles with variable success. His last attempt produced a perfect silver needle that Griphook preserved as evidence of his progress. Well done, Mr. Potter. Few wizards achieve such control on their first day. Harry beamed at the praise. It feels natural, like the magic wants to work for me. An apt description. Magic responds to those who understand its nature. Griphook checked his pocket watch. We've arranged a special dinner guest who may provide insight into your parents that even the portraits cannot. Who? Harry asked eagerly. Former Professor Horace Slughorn. He taught potions at Hogwarts for decades, including during your parents' time. He's retired now, and crucially, was never part of Dumbledore's inner circle despite working at Hogwarts. An hour later, Harry met the retired professor, a massive, walrus-mustached man who wheezed slightly as he settled his bulk into a reinforced chair in Potter Haven's dining room. Harry Potter, Slughorn breathed, studying Harry's face. Extraordinary. I'd know those eyes anywhere, Lily's exact shade of green. Remarkable witch, your mother. Best potion student I ever taught, and that's saying something. You taught my mother? Harry leaned forward eagerly. Taught her? My dear boy, I mentored her. Recognized her talent immediately, despite her muggle background. Most witches struggle with the precision potion-making demands, but Lily had an intuitive understanding. Over a lavish dinner, Tippy had outdone herself, clearly awed by hosting a professor. Slughorn regaled Harry with stories of both his parents. Your father was a prodigy in transfiguration, turned his desk into a perfectly formed pig in his 3rd year, gave poor Minerva McGonagall heart palpitations. But potions? Dreadful. Only scraped and exceeds expectations on his OWLs because Lily tutored him relentlessly. Were they always friends? Harry asked. Oh, heavens no. Slughorn chuckled. Quite the opposite for years. James pursued Lily from their 3rd year, but she found him arrogant, which, to be fair, he was. Brilliant but cocky. It wasn't until 7th year, after he'd matured considerably and been named head boy, that she finally agreed to date him. What about their friends? Like Sirius Black? Slughorn's expression darkened. Ah, Black. That business never sat right with me. The boy was reckless, certainly, but betrayal. He worshipped James, treated him like a brother. Do you think he was innocent? I'm just an old potions master, not a detective. Slughorn sipped his wine. But I will say this, Sirius Black came from a notoriously dark family and rejected everything they stood for. Ran away at 16 and moved in with your grandparents. The Blacks disowned him, literally burned his name from the family tapestry. Why would someone who sacrificed everything to oppose dark wizardry suddenly join Voldemort? This aligned with what Harry's grandparents' portrait had said. The evidence for Sirius's innocence seemed to be mounting. What about Peter Pettigrew? Harry asked, remembering another name from his grandparents' stories. Ah, poor Pettigrew. Slughorn shook his head. Unremarkable wizard who somehow attached himself to 3 exceptional ones, James, Sirius, and Remus Lupin. Always tagging along, always a step behind. They called themselves the Marauders, infamous pranksters. And Pettigrew died. Killed by Sirius. According to the official story. All they found was a finger. Slughorn leaned forward conspiratorially. Though between us, that always struck me as peculiar. Dark curses powerful enough to obliterate a body don't typically leave convenient finger souvenirs. After dinner, Slughorn presented Harry with a gift, a photo album containing pictures of Lily and James during their Hogwarts years. I collected photos of all my notable students, he explained. Called them my trophies, though your mother scolded me for the term. Said people aren't prizes to be displayed. Harry accepted the album reverently. Here were his parents as teenagers, his mother's vivid red hair and bright smile, his father's perpetually messy black hair and mischievous grin. Photos of them studying, playing Quidditch, his father, brewing potions, his mother, and finally, a wedding photo where they danced under autumn leaves, looking radiantly happy. Thank you, Harry said, voice thick with emotion. This is the best gift I've ever received. Slughorn patted his shoulder. Your parents were extraordinary people, Harry. Not just magically gifted, but kind, brave, and loyal. Remember that legacy, it's worth far more than all the gold Dumbledore stole. After Slughorn departed, Harry stayed up late examining each photo, memorizing his parents' faces, movements, the way they interacted with friends. He fell asleep with the album beside his pillow, more determined than ever to reclaim everything Dumbledore had taken from him, not just the gold, but the connections, the history, the truth of who his parents had been. The following morning brought chaos. The Daily Prophet story had exploded across Wizarding Britain, spawning reactions ranging from outrage to disbelief. Ragnarok arrived early with reports of protesters outside Gringotts, some supporting the Goblin's actions, others decrying the slander against Dumbledore. The Wizengamot has called another emergency session for tomorrow, he informed Harry over breakfast. Your emancipation case will be presented alongside the ongoing theft investigation. Will I need to attend? Harry asked nervously. Not yet. Augusta Longbottom will represent your interests, along with Gringotts' legal team. Ragnarok slid a parchment across the table. However, you might consider preparing a statement. Public opinion remains divided, and hearing directly from you could sway the undecided. Harry nodded, though the thought of his words being broadcast to the entire wizarding world terrified him. I'll work on something. Excellent. Now, you have visitors arriving shortly, the Longbottoms for your joint tutoring, and afterward, a Muggle-born witch named Hermione Granger. Hermione Granger? Harry frowned. I don't know her. She's part of an experimental ministry program identifying magical children in the Muggle world earlier than the standard Hogwarts age. Exceptional magical potential, apparently. Madame Bones suggested introducing you to peers beyond pure blood circles. Oh. Harry wasn't sure how he felt about meeting new people. His experiences with other children, mainly Dudley and his gang, hadn't exactly been positive. He didn't have long to worry. The Longbottoms arrived promptly at 9, Augusta looking formidable as ever and Neville clutching a small potted plant. Mr. Potter, Augusta greeted formally. The storm has broken, as expected. Dumbledore's supporters are rallying, but they face an uphill battle against Gringotts' evidence. Good morning, Madam Longbottom, Harry replied with the formal bow Griphook had taught him. Thank you for representing me tomorrow. She nodded approvingly at his manners. The ancient houses must stand together in times like these. Now, I believe you boys have lessons scheduled. While Augusta and Ragnarok retired to the study to discuss strategy, Harry and Neville were led to a sunlit room that had been converted to a classroom. 3 tutors waited, a middle-aged wizard for magical theory, a younger witch for practical spell work, and a goblin for history and politics. I brought you something, Neville said shyly, holding out the plant. It's a remembrall plant, helps you remember things you've forgotten. I thought it might be useful with all the new information you're learning. Harry accepted the gift, touched by the thoughtfulness. Thanks, Neville. That's really cool. The plant's leaves shimmered slightly when Harry touched it, turning faintly blue. It works. Neville said excitedly. Blue means you've forgotten something important but not urgent. If it turned red, that would be something critical. Harry frowned, trying to think what he might have forgotten. Maybe feeding Hedwig, he mused, thinking of the snowy owl Griphook had purchased for him yesterday. Their lessons began with magical theory, the foundations of spell creation, the difference between charms and transfiguration, the importance of precise wand movements and clear pronunciation. Harry was surprised to find Neville struggling with even basic spells, despite coming from a wizarding family. "Gran says I might be a squib," Neville whispered when their practical instructor stepped away. "Someone from a magical family without much magic themselves." "That's ridiculous," Harry said, watching Neville's feather twitch feebly under his Wingardium Leviosa. "I can feel your magic. It's there, just stuck somehow." Stuck. Harry couldn't explain how he knew, but he sensed Neville's magic was like water behind a dam, present but blocked. "Try my wand," he suggested impulsively. Neville hesitated. "We're not supposed to use each other's wands. Just once. See if it makes a difference." After glancing to ensure their instructor was still distracted, Neville took Harry's training wand and attempted the levitation charm again. The feather shot to the ceiling just as Harry's had on his first attempt. "Whoa!" Neville gasped, nearly dropping the wand in shock. Harry grinned. "See? Definitely not a squib. Maybe your wand just isn't right for you." "It's my dad's," Neville admitted. "Gran says I should be honored to use it." Their instructor returned before they could discuss further, but Harry filed away this information. From his wand lore reading, he knew wands chose wizards, not the other way around. Using an unsuited wand, especially one with loyalty to another wizard, could severely hamper magical development. After lunch, they moved to history and politics with the Goblin instructor, Blood Fong, who had little patience for sugarcoating. "The Ministry of Magic systematically oppresses non-human magical beings," he stated matter-of-factly. "Goblins, centaurs, mere-people, house elves, all classified as creatures rather than beings when convenient for wizard lawmakers." "But that's not fair," Harry protested. "Of course it's not fair," Blood Fong sneered. "Fairness has nothing to do with politics. Power does. Wizards maintain power by controlling the narrative and restricting rights. Not all wizards support those laws," Neville pointed out quietly. "Gran always votes for creature rights expansions." "A minority position," Blood Fong acknowledged. "But not an insignificant one. The Longbottom and Potter seats have historically aligned on such issues." The discussion progressed to the structure of the Wisengamot, the balance between traditional houses and ministry appointees, and the complex dance of alliances that determined most outcomes before votes were even cast. By 4 o'clock, Harry's head was spinning with information, and he was grateful when their lessons concluded. Neville, however, looked disappointed to leave. "This was brilliant," he said as they packed up their notes. "Much better than studying alone with my regular tutors." "You could come back tomorrow," Harry suggested. "After the Wisengamot session?" Neville brightened. "I'd like that. If Gran agrees." Augusta did agree, looking pleased at the budding friendship between the two heirs. As they prepared to depart, she took Harry aside. "Your statement for tomorrow," she said. "Keep it simple, emotional, and focused on your personal experience. The legal team will handle the financial aspects. What the Wisengamot needs to hear is how Dumbledore's decisions affected you as a child." Harry nodded. "I understand." After the Longbottoms left, Harry had barely an hour to work on his statement before Tippy announced another arrival. "Miss Hermione Granger and her parents are here, Master Harry." Harry hurried to the entrance hall, where Griphook was greeting 3 people who looked distinctly out of place in the magical manner. The adults, both dressed in professional Muggle attire, gazed around in undisguised wonder. Between them stood a girl Harry's age with bushy brown hair and rather large front teeth, clutching a notebook and looking both nervous and excited. "Mr. Potter," Griphook began formally, "may I present Dr. and Dr. Granger, dental healers in the Muggle world, and their daughter, Hermione Granger, recently identified as magically gifted." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Harry said, extending his hand first to Hermione, then her parents. "It's an honor to meet you, Harry Potter," Hermione said earnestly. I've read all about you in Modern Magical History and The Rise and Fall of the Dark Arts. Though they clearly got some things wrong, according to today's newspaper. Harry blinked at this rapid introduction. You've read those books already? I thought you just found out about magic. Oh, I found out 3 months ago when I turned 7 and accidentally turned my teacher's hair blue. The Ministry has this new early identification program for Muggleborns with strong magical signatures. She took a breath. They've been providing books and basic magical education, so we're not so behind when we start Hogwarts. Her enthusiasm reminded Harry of himself just days ago, discovering magic existed. Why don't we move to the sitting room, he suggested, remembering his etiquette lessons. Tippy can bring tea and cakes. Over refreshments, the Grangers explained their situation. Both were successful dentists who had always known their daughter was special but had attributed her intelligence and occasional strange occurrences to giftedness. When Ministry representatives explained she was a witch, everything suddenly made sense, Emma Granger said. The books flying off shelves when she was excited, plants growing overnight in her room. The program has been wonderful, Dan Granger added. Hermione meets weekly with a tutor for magical theory, and we've visited Diagon Alley twice for books and basic supplies. Though we can't practice actual magic yet, Hermione said with clear disappointment. Not until we're older or have special exemptions. That's why we're here, actually, Emma explained. When the Ministry learned Hermione had read about you, combined with yesterday's news. They suggested a play date, Dan finished with a smile. Thought you both might benefit from meeting another magical child in unusual circumstances. Harry glanced at Hermione, who was practically vibrating with curiosity as she studied the magical portraits and moving objects around the room. Would you like to see the library? He offered. Her eyes lit up. You have a library? With magical books? For the next hour, Harry showed Hermione around Potter Haven while their adult companions discussed more serious matters. Unlike Neville's shy, hesitant approach, Hermione bombarded Harry with questions about everything from house elves, isn't that slavery, to magical portraits, how much of the original person's consciousness transfers to the painting, to his own magical education. You can already do spells, she asked incredulously when Harry demonstrated the color-changing charm on a bookmark. That's not fair. The Ministry says underage magic is strictly prohibited. Special circumstances, Harry explained. I'm applying for early emancipation because of the whole Dumbledore situation. Hermione's expression grew serious. I read about that in today's Prophet. Did he really steal from you and leave you with awful relatives? Yeah. I lived in a cupboard under the stairs until 4 days ago. That's horrible. Her indignation was immediate and fierce. And illegal, even under Muggle law. My parents would never treat a child that way, they believe children deserve respect and autonomy within age-appropriate boundaries. Harry found himself warming to this opinionated, bookish girl who spoke like a miniature adult and radiated righteous anger on his behalf. When they returned to the sitting room, they found Griphook and the Grangers deep in discussion about wizard banking systems versus Muggle equivalents. Fascinating use of gold standard, Dan was saying. The Muggle world abandoned that decades ago. Wizard economics operate on different principles, Griphook explained. Magic creates certain stability factors absent in non-magical systems. They reluctantly wrapped up their conversation when Harry and Hermione appeared. We should be going, Emma said, checking her watch. We've taken up enough of Harry's time, and he has that important statement to prepare. Statement? Hermione asked. For tomorrow's Wizengamot session, Harry explained. I have to write something about what Dumbledore did and how it affected me. That's a lot of pressure, Hermione said sympathetically. Will you read it publicly? No, someone will read it for me. But everyone will know they're my words. Hermione hesitated, then offered, I could help, if you want. I got top marks in composition at school. Harry considered. He had been struggling with how to express his feelings without sounding childish or vindictive. That would be great, actually. The Grangers exchanged glances, then Dan nodded. We could stay another hour if it would help. With Hermione's assistance, Harry's statement took shape quickly. She had a knack for organization and phrasing that transformed his scattered thoughts into a coherent narrative. Together, they crafted 3 concise paragraphs that conveyed the essential truth: Harry had been neglected, his inheritance stolen, and his parents' wishes ignored, all by someone entrusted with his care. It's perfect, Harry said when they finished. Direct but not whiny. The facts speak for themselves, Hermione said matter-of-factly. You don't need dramatics when the truth is already dramatic enough. As the Grangers prepared to leave, Hermione asked hesitantly, could we visit again? I don't have any friends who understand about magic. Everyone thinks I'm strange. I'd like that, Harry said sincerely. Maybe you could join Neville and me for lessons sometime. Her face lit up. Really? That would be wonderful. They exchanged awkward but heartfelt goodbyes, with promises to arrange future meetings through proper ministry channels. After they left, Griphook commented, an exceptional young witch. Her magical aura is remarkably developed for her age. She's brilliant, Harry agreed. Intense, but in a good way. Strategic friendships with talented individuals from diverse backgrounds will serve you well, Griphook observed. The Longbottom heir brings pure-blood connections and family alliance. The Granger girl offers fresh perspective and formidable intellect. Both could be valuable allies in the years ahead. Harry frowned slightly. They're not just strategic friendships. I actually like them. Griphook's expression softened, an unusual sight on a goblin's face. Of course. Forgive the goblin perspective. We tend to view relationships through a political lens. It's okay, Harry said. But I've had enough politics for one day. Can we practice more magic before dinner? The evening passed with further spell practice, Harry's confidence growing with each successful charm. By bedtime, he could levitate multiple objects simultaneously, transform matchsticks into needles consistently, and produce small magical lights that followed his fingers like obedient fireflies. Your progress is remarkable, Griphook commented as they concluded. At this rate, you'll be ahead of your age peers when you eventually attend Hogwarts. If I attend Hogwarts, Harry corrected. Dumbledore is still headmaster. For now, Griphook agreed. Though that may change depending on tomorrow's outcome. Harry fell asleep that night with mixed feelings, excitement about his magical progress, anxiety about the Wizengamot session, and a warm sense of possibility from his new friendships. Whatever happened tomorrow would shape the coming months, perhaps years, of his life. The Wizengamot chamber hummed with tension. 50 witches and wizards in plum-colored robes filled the tiered seats, their faces ranging from curious to concerned to openly hostile. In the visitor gallery, reporters from the Daily Prophet, Witch Weekly, and even the international magical press jostled for better views. Augusta Longbottom sat in the Potter proxy seat, her vulture hat making her easy to spot among the sea of pointed wizard hats. Beside her sat a team of goblins in formal attire, their presence unprecedented in Wizengamot history. At precisely 10 o'clock, Tiberius Ogden, the acting chief warlock, gavelled the session to order. We convene this emergency session to address 2 interconnected matters, he announced, voice magically amplified. First, allegations of financial impropriety against Albus Dumbledore regarding the Potter estate. Second, the petition for early emancipation of Harry James Potter, last heir to the ancient and noble house of Potter. A door opened, and Albus Dumbledore entered the chamber. No longer wearing the chief warlock's robes, he nonetheless commanded attention in midnight blue robes embroidered with silver stars. His long white beard was immaculately groomed, and his half-moon spectacles glinted in the chamber's magical light. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Some members nodded respectfully, others pointedly looked away. As the subject of investigation, Professor Dumbledore may observe but not preside, Ogden continued. We will begin with the financial allegations. Director Ragnarok of Gringotts Wizarding Bank will present evidence. The Goblin director approached the central speaking platform, carrying a leather portfolio. For the next 30 minutes, he methodically outlined the financial trail: unauthorized withdrawals beginning November 1, 1981, the day after the Potters' deaths, shell companies funneling Potter wealth into various projects, properties transferred to Dumbledore's control, artifacts borrowed from Potter vaults never returned. In total, Ragnarok concluded, our audit confirms 26.2 billion galleons diverted from Potter accounts over 7 years, with approximately 68% recoverable through asset freezes and property reclamations. Stunned silence followed this pronouncement. Even Dumbledore's strongest supporters looked disturbed by the specific figures, dates, and documentation. Does the accused wish to respond? Ogden asked. Dumbledore rose gracefully, his expression one of sorrowful concern rather than defensiveness. Esteemed colleagues, he began, I admit these figures appear damning when presented in isolation. However, context is essential. Following Lord Voldemort's defeat, a collective shudder ran through the chamber at the name. Harry Potter became the most endangered child in magical Britain. Death Eaters remained at large, seeking vengeance. The boy required extraordinary protection. Dumbledore gestured to the ledgers Ragnarok had presented. Yes, funds were allocated from the Potter vaults. They supported safe houses for Order members who continued to hunt Death Eaters. They funded specialized wards around Privet Drive and monitoring systems to alert me of any magical approach. They maintained a network of informants watching for dark resurgence. He spread his hands. Was it unorthodox? Perhaps. Was it necessary? Absolutely. Every Canute spent served one purpose: keeping Harry Potter alive in a world that still contained those who wished him harm. His explanation drew approving nods from some Wizengamot members. Augusta Longbottom, however, rose immediately. If I may, Acting Chief Warlock. Ogden nodded permission. Albus Dumbledore speaks of protection, yet placed the boy who lived with Muggle relatives who housed him in a cupboard for 7 years. Her voice carried unmitigated scorn. He speaks of monitoring systems, yet never once checked on the child's welfare. He speaks of safe houses for Order members, yet many of us who fought against you-know-who received no such accommodations. She fixed Dumbledore with a steely glare. Most damningly, he speaks of acting in Harry Potter's best interests while flagrantly violating James and Lily Potter's will, which explicitly stated the boy should never be placed with Petunia Dursley under any circumstances. This revelation caused another stir. Dumbledore's expression remained impassive, though a slight tightening around his eyes suggested Augusta's attack had landed. I believe, Augusta continued, we should hear directly from Mr. Potter himself, via statement. Ogden consulted his notes. We had planned to address the emancipation petition first. The matters are inseparable, Augusta interrupted. Mr. Potter's treatment directly influences the emancipation decision. After brief consultation with other senior members, Ogden nodded. Proceed with Mr. Potter's statement. Augusta unfolded a parchment written in Harry's careful hand, enhanced by Hermione's suggestions. Statement from Harry James Potter, as dictated on July 30, 1987, until 4 days ago, I lived in a cupboard under the stairs at number 4 Privet Drive. My aunt and uncle told me my parents died in a car crash while drunk. They called me Freak instead of my name, gave me Dudley's broken toys and 2 large clothes, and punished me when strange things happened around me, things I now know were accidental magic. I cooked meals I wasn't allowed to eat, wore clothes that didn't fit, and attended school with broken glasses held together with tape. When I brought home better grades than my cousin, I was locked in my cupboard without food. When teachers asked about bruises from Harry hunting, my cousin's favorite game, Aunt Petunia said I was clumsy and troubled. I didn't know I was a wizard. I didn't know my parents were murdered protecting me. I didn't know I had a godfather or family properties or a vault filled with gold. I didn't know Albus Dumbledore had appointed himself my guardian or was spending my inheritance on things that never helped me. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for justice. I'm asking to control my own future so no one can hurt me or steal from me again. I'm asking the Wizengamot to look at the evidence and ask, would you trust Albus Dumbledore with your child after what he did to me? Augusta refolded the parchment, her expression grimly satisfied at the impact of Harry's words. Several witches dabbed at their eyes. Even some of Dumbledore's supporters looked shaken. A moving statement, Ogden acknowledged, his own voice rougher than before. Professor Dumbledore, do you wish to respond? Dumbledore rose again, his customary twinkle notably absent. I am deeply disturbed by Harry's living conditions. I placed monitoring charms to detect magical threats, not to observe day-to-day treatment, which was, clearly a grave oversight. He paused. Regarding the will, I acted under emergency provisions granted by the Wizengamot during wartime. The blood protection offered by Lily's sacrifice could only be maintained through her sister, providing a shield no other guardian could offer. And the financial diversions? Ragnarok demanded. How did personal renovations to your brother's pub protect the boy? A flicker of annoyance crossed Dumbledore's face. A comprehensive explanation would require security clearances many here lack. Suffice to say, all expenditures served the greater network of protection. Convenient, Augusta remarked acidly. When pressed for specifics, claimed security concerns. The debate continued for another hour, with various Wizengamot members questioning both Ragnarok and Dumbledore. The chamber gradually divided, with older members generally supporting Dumbledore while younger members expressed outrage at Harry's treatment. Finally, Ogden called for order. We will now address the emancipation petition. Madam Bones, please present the DMLE's position. Amelia Bones approached the platform, her monocle flashing as she surveyed the chamber. The Department of Magical Law Enforcement has conducted a preliminary investigation into Harry Potter's living conditions, guardianship, and current situation. Our findings confirm the statement you heard. She adjusted her monocle. Additionally, we reviewed precedent regarding last heirs of ancient and noble houses. She held up a thick legal tome. The Wizarding Family Preservation Act of 1412 establishes that, when a sole heir under the age of majority demonstrates both need and capacity, the Wizengamot may grant limited emancipation to preserve family legacy and protect against exploitation. She closed the book with a snap. Mr. Potter clearly demonstrates need, having suffered exploitation by his previous guardian. As for capacity, Gringotts' inheritance testing revealed magical maturity significantly above average for his age, and interviews with his current tutors confirm intellectual readiness. What of his physical age? Someone called. He's only 7. Precisely why we recommend limited emancipation, Bones clarified. Mr. Potter would control his finances and properties through Gringotts' oversight, choose his place of residence, and direct his education. However, he would have a guardian ad litem from the Ministry for Legal Matters, Health Decisions, and Public Appearances until age 11, when standard Hogwarts attendance would begin. This proposal triggered another round of debate, with questions about precedent, Potter Haven's security, and Harry's continued magical development. Throughout, Dumbledore remained silent, his expression thoughtful as he observed the shifting alliances in the chamber. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion set in. Ogden called for votes on 2 motions. First, shall Albus Dumbledore be removed as magical guardian of Harry Potter and required to submit to full financial audit regarding Potter estate management? The vote was decisive, 37 in favor, 13 opposed. Second, shall Harry Potter be granted limited emancipation as outlined by Madam Bones, with continuation review at age 11? This vote proved closer, 31 in favor, 19 opposed. Both motions carry, Ogden announced. Financial restitution details will be determined by Gringotts with ministry oversight. Limited emancipation takes effect immediately, with Madam Amelia Bones appointed guardian ad litem until further notice. He gavelled the session closed, but not before Dumbledore requested and received permission to address the chamber one final time. "My friends and colleagues," he began softly, his voice nonetheless carrying to every corner, "I accept the Gringotts' judgment and will cooperate fully with the financial audit. However, I must express grave concern about young Harry's safety outside the blood wards I established." He looked around gravely. Lord Voldemort's defeat was incomplete. Those who know the deeper mysteries understand he will return, and when he does, his first target will be the boy who vanquished him. I implore those now responsible for Harry's welfare to exercise utmost vigilance. With that ominous warning, he swept from the chamber, leaving uneasy murmurs in his wake. Back at Potter Haven, Harry paced anxiously, awaiting news. Griphook had left a monitoring crystal that would glow different colors depending on the Gringotts' decisions, but hours had passed with no change. Finally, as afternoon stretched into evening, the crystal flashed blue, then green. "They've voted." Harry called to Tippy, who had been stress-cleaning the same bookshelf for hours. Moments later, the Fluff fireplace activated, and Augusta Longbottom stepped through, looking tired but satisfied. "We won, Mr. Potter," she announced without preamble. "Both votes passed. You are officially emancipated for financial and residential purposes, with Madam Bones as your legal guardian for other matters." Relief flooded through Harry. "And Dumbledore?" "Removed as your guardian and required to submit to full financial audit." Augusta brushed soot from her robes. He took it better than expected, no objections, only a cryptic warning about future dangers. Before Harry could ask for details, the Flu activated again, admitting Ragnarok, Griphook, and finally Amelia Bones. "Congratulations, Mr. Potter," Madam Bones said, extending her hand. "You are now the youngest partially emancipated wizard in 3 centuries. "Thank you," Harry said, shaking her hand. "Thank you all for helping me." "The battle is only beginning," Ragnarok warned. "Dumbledore accepted today's defeat too easily. He's planning something." "Let him plan," Harry said with more confidence than he felt. "We have truth on our side." "Truth is a powerful weapon," Amelia agreed, "but Dumbledore has decades of political capital and public goodwill. The Prophet will report today's decision, but expect counternarratives to emerge." They spent the evening discussing security measures, educational plans, and the upcoming week's events, including Sirius Black's hearing and scheduled meetings with Gringotts investment managers to review recovered assets. "One matter requires immediate decision," Ragnarok said as their meeting concluded. "The press is clamoring for direct contact with you. A controlled interview could shape the narrative advantageously." Harry frowned. "I don't want to be in the newspapers more than I already am." "Understandable," Amelia said. "However, Ragnarok has a point. Either you control your story, or others will create their version." After discussion, they compromised on a brief statement Harry would deliver from Potter Haven, with one Prophet reporter and photographer present. No direct questions, no exploitation of the boy who lived angle, just Harry's unfiltered thoughts on recent events. "We'll schedule it for the day after tomorrow," Amelia decided. "After you've had time to prepare and we've screened potential reporters for Dumbledore connections." As the adults prepared to leave, Harry remembered something. "Tomorrow's my birthday," he said suddenly. "I'll be 8. The announcement created a moment of awkward silence, broken by Griphook. "Indeed. We had planned a small celebration, if that meets with your approval." "Really?" Harry couldn't hide his surprise. The Dursleys had never acknowledged his birthdays. "Of course," Augusta said. "Neville's birthday is today, actually. Perhaps a joint celebration." "That would be brilliant," Harry said, grinning. After finalizing birthday arrangements, the visitors departed, leaving Harry alone with Tippy, who immediately began planning elaborate birthday decorations. Harry headed to bed physically exhausted but mentally energized. In one day, he'd gained legal recognition of his independence, removed Dumbledore's control, and arranged his first ever birthday party. The future stretched before him with possibilities that would have been unimaginable a week ago. As he drifted towards sleep, Harry wondered what Dumbledore was doing now. Planning his next move? Licking his wounds? Or simply regrouping for a longer game? Whatever came next, Harry felt ready. He had allies, resources, and growing magical skills. Most importantly, he had the truth, and if today proved anything, it was that truth, properly wielded, could shake even the greatest wizard of the age. The following morning, Harry woke to Tippy bouncing excitedly beside his bed. "Happy birthday, Master Harry. Tippy has special breakfast ready. And presents. Many presents arriving all morning." Harry blinked sleepily. "Presents? From who?" "From everyone," Tippy exclaimed. "Wizard children sending gifts to the boy who lived. Gringotts screening them all for nasty spells first, of course." The concept of receiving birthday presents, from strangers, no less, was so foreign that Harry needed a moment to process it. Downstairs, he found the dining table laden with his favorite breakfast foods, which Tippy had carefully noted over the past days, and a modest stack of presents. These passed security screening, Griphook explained, arriving as Harry surveyed the gifts. The rest remain at Gringotts for thorough examination. "Happy birthday, Mr. Potter." "Thank you," Harry said, still overwhelmed. "I've never had presents before. Or a birthday cake." Something flashed in Griphook's eyes, anger, perhaps, at this reminder of Harry's deprived childhood. "Today will be different," he promised. "The Longbottoms arrive at noon for the celebration. Until then, you might enjoy opening these." The approved gifts included books on Quidditch from the Longbottoms, a beginner's potions kit from Professor Slughorn, enchanted drawing supplies from the Grangers, and a magnificent illustrated history of the Potter family, commissioned by Gringotts. "This is incredible," Harry breathed, carefully turning pages that traced his family back 12 generations, complete with moving portraits and significant achievements. "A proper heir should know his lineage," Griphook said. "Director Ragnarok ordered its creation from our archives when your case began." The morning passed pleasantly with Harry exploring his gifts and continuing his magical studies. At noon, the Floo activated, admitting Augusta and Neville Longbottom, followed by the Grangers, escorted by a ministry representative, and finally Amelia Bones, who brought another surprise guest, Susan Bones, her niece, a red-headed girl Harry's age who greeted him with shy curiosity. "Happy birthday, Harry," Neville said, more confidently than during their previous meetings. "And thanks for sharing it with me." "Joint birthday buddies," Harry grinned. "That's brilliant." Tippy had transformed the manor's formal dining room into a celebration space, with floating balloons, streamers that changed colors, and 2 cakes, one decorated with moving Quidditch players for Harry, the other with magical plants that actually grew tiny blooms for Neville. For Harry, who had spent previous birthdays doing extra chores at Privet Drive, the celebration was nothing short of magical. The children played simplified Quidditch in the garden using training brooms that hovered just a few feet off the ground. Hermione, initially reluctant to fly, proved surprisingly adept once Harry showed her the proper technique. "It's just physics," she declared as she zoomed past Neville. "Aerodynamics with magical assistance." Susan, who came from a wizarding family like Neville, taught them magical party games Harry had never heard of, including Exploding Snap and a modified version of musical chairs where the chairs occasionally tried to scoot away from players. While the children played, the adults discussed more serious matters in hushed tones that occasionally drifted to Harry's ears: Dumbledore supporters regrouping, Black's hearing on Thursday, Prophet interview tomorrow. Harry deliberately focused on enjoying his first real birthday, pushing tomorrow's concerns aside. After cake and presents, the children sprawled in the manor's library, where Harry showed off his magical progress. "That's advanced for your age," Susan observed as Harry successfully performed a Lumos charm, creating light at his wand tip. "We're not supposed to do magic until Hogwarts," Hermione reminded them, though she watched Harry's demonstrations with undisguised envy. Special circumstances, Harry explained again. And it's all supervised. I wish I could practice more, Neville said wistfully. Gran only lets me try basic spells once a week, with her watching. Maybe we could all study together sometimes, Susan suggested. Auntie says magical children learn faster in groups. By late afternoon, as the party wound down, Harry had formed tentative friendships with all three children, each offering different perspectives on the magical world he was entering. Neville's traditional pureblood upbringing, Hermione's academic approach to magic, and Susan's practical ministry-influenced viewpoint created a well-rounded introduction to wizarding society. As guests prepared to leave, Amelia pulled Harry aside. Tomorrow's interview is set for 10 o'clock. Rita Skeeter from The Prophet, not my first choice, but she's influential and, more importantly, currently anti-Dumbledore. What should I say? Harry asked nervously. The truth, as you understand it. Keep it simple. Focus on how you feel about recent events rather than specific accusations. She squeezed his shoulder. You've handled worse than a nosy reporter, Harry. Just be yourself. The party ended with promises to meet again soon, perhaps for regular study sessions as Susan had suggested. As the final guests departed, Harry felt a warm contentment he'd never experienced, the satisfaction of friendship, celebration, and belonging. That evening, as he practiced spells in the library, Griphook arrived with news. Dumbledore has made his first move, the Goblin announced without preamble. He's scheduled a press conference tomorrow afternoon, following your interview. What will he say? Harry asked. Our sources couldn't confirm details, but the theme appears to be misunderstandings and reconciliation. Griphook's expression suggested skepticism. He's also requested a private meeting with you next week. With me? Why? Ostensibly to apologize and explain his actions personally. Griphook sneered. More likely to assess your vulnerability and influence your thinking. Harry considered this. Should I meet him? That's your decision, Mr. Potter. As an emancipated minor, you have that right. However, I would advise caution. Dumbledore is a skilled legilimens, a mind reader, essentially. He can read minds. Harry's eyes widened in alarm. With eye contact, yes. We can arrange a clemency training, mental defense, but it takes time to master. Griphook paused. If you do meet him, I recommend having Madame Bones and a Gringotts representative present. I'll think about it, Harry promised. The idea of facing Dumbledore both terrified and intrigued him. What would the man say to justify leaving Harry in that cupboard for 7 years? That night, Harry's dreams were a jumble of images, Dumbledore's twinkling eyes turning dark and invasive, the Dursleys' cupboard expanding into a courtroom, his parents watching from portraits with concerned expressions. He woke early, feeling unrest but determined. Today he would speak directly to the wizarding public for the first time. Today Dumbledore would begin his counteroffensive. The clash that had begun in the Wizengamot would expand to include public opinion, press narratives, and political maneuvering. Harry dressed carefully in robes Griphook had selected, formal enough to convey respect for tradition but with subtle Potter family emblems to reinforce his heritage. By 9:30, Potter Haven's formal sitting room had been rearranged for the interview, with Harry's chair positioned to display the Potter family crest on the wall behind him. Remember, Amelia coached as they waited for the reporter, you're not on trial. You're sharing your experience. If Skeeter asks something inappropriate, simply say you're not comfortable answering. At precisely 10 o'clock, Rita Skeeter arrived through the flue, accompanied by a photographer. The witch wore elaborate acid-green robes, jeweled spectacles, and a predatory smile. Her blonde hair was set in elaborate curls, and her long nails were painted a matching green. Harry Potter, she exclaimed, extending a hand with dramatic flair. Rita Skeeter, Daily Prophet. What an absolute pleasure to meet the boy who lived in person. Harry shook her hand cautiously. Thank you for coming, Miss Skeeter. I understand we have 30 minutes. Indeed, and I'll treasure every second. She settled into her chair, extracting an acid green quill and parchment from her crocodile skin handbag. This is my quick quotes quill, it records our conversation so I can focus entirely on you. The quill positioned itself above the parchment, quivering in apparent eagerness. I'll begin with your statement, then we'll take a few photographs, Skeeter explained, her smile never wavering. Shall we? Harry nodded, taking a deep breath. He'd practiced his statement repeatedly with Grip Hook and Amelia, focusing on simplicity and emotional honesty without direct accusations. My name is Harry Potter. Until last week, I didn't know I was a wizard. I didn't know my parents were Lily and James Potter, who died protecting me from a dark wizard. I didn't know I had a family legacy or inheritance. I lived with my muggle aunt and uncle who disliked magic and treated me accordingly. I slept in a cupboard under the stairs, wore my cousin's old clothes, and was told my parents died in a car crash. Last week, the Goblin Nation found me and revealed the truth through a blood inheritance test. They showed me that Albus Dumbledore had appointed himself my guardian against my parents' wishes, placed me with relatives my parents had specifically excluded in their will, and removed money from my family vaults without proper authorization. I'm grateful to Gringotts, Madame Bones, and the Wizengamot for helping restore my inheritance and grant me limited emancipation. I'm now living at a Potter family property, learning about magic, and connecting with my parents' world for the first time. I don't hate Professor Dumbledore. I don't know him. But I believe his actions hurt me, whether intentionally or not. All I want now is the chance to build the life my parents would have wanted for me, safe, educated about my heritage, and free to make my own choices. Harry finished, surprised to find his voice had remained steady throughout. Skeeter's quill had been scratching furiously, though he noticed with concern it had written far more than he'd actually said. Magnificent, Skeeter breathed, her eyes gleaming behind her spectacles. So much tragedy and resilience in one so young. Tell me, Harry, how did it feel discovering Dumbledore's betrayal? I was confused at first, Harry said carefully. It was a lot to take in, magic existing, my parents being murdered, someone I'd never met controlling my life. Devastated by the deception of a man the wizarding world trusted implicitly, the quill wrote, making Harry frown. And these muggles, your relatives, did they abuse you physically as well as emotionally? Skeeter pressed. Harry shifted uncomfortably. My cousin and his friends used me as a punching bag in games they called Harry hunting. My uncle grabbed me roughly sometimes. But mostly they just didn't want me there. Subjected to systematic physical violence while magical Britain's greatest wizard looked away, the quill scratched. Ms. Skeeter, Amelia Bones interrupted from her position near the door. Please ensure your quill records Harry's actual words, not embellished interpretations. Skeeter's smile tightened. Of course, Madame Bones. A simple calibration issue. She tapped the quill, which quivered briefly. Now, Harry, what would you say to those who believe Dumbledore acted in your best interest, protecting you from Death Eaters? I'd ask why protection required a cupboard, Harry said bluntly. And why he never checked on me in 7 years. And why money from my vaults went to things that never helped me. For once, the quill appeared to transcribe his words accurately. What about your future plans? Skeeter asked. Hogwarts. Political aspirations. After all, you'll eventually control a Wizengamot seat. I'm 8 years old as of yesterday, Harry reminded her. Right now, I'm focused on learning magic, understanding my family history, and maybe making some friends who see me as just Harry, not the boy who lived. The interview continued for the full 30 minutes, with Skeeter probing for increasingly dramatic angles and Harry sticking resolutely to his measured responses. The photographer took several staged photos of Harry in front of the Potter crest, holding his training wand, and examining a book on magical theory. When they finally departed, Harry collapsed into his chair, emotionally drained. Well done, Amelia praised. You maintained dignity without appearing rehearsed. The prophet won't be able to twist your words too dramatically with both the Goblin Nation and DMLE watching. She'll try anyway, Griphook predicted darkly. Rita Skeeter has built her career on sensationalism. When will the article be published? Harry asked. Tomorrow's morning edition, Amelia said. Conveniently following Dumbledore's press conference this afternoon. Harry nodded, feeling the weight of public scrutiny settling on his shoulders. What now? Now, Griphook said, we prepare for Dumbledore's counter-narrative. And then? Then? Harry prompted when the goblin paused. Griphook's sharp teeth gleamed in a predatory smile. Then we attend Sirius Black's hearing and potentially add another player to our side of the board. Albus Dumbledore's press conference took place in Hogwarts' Great Hall, a strategic choice that reinforced his position as headmaster even as his other titles remained suspended. Dozens of reporters filled the house tables, with international magical press prominently positioned to emphasize the global interest. Harry watched via a special crystal Gringotts had provided, which displayed the event like a Muggle television. Amelia, Griphook, and Augusta Longbottom joined him, each offering commentary as Dumbledore approached the podium. The aged wizard presented the perfect image of dignified concern, his robe somber gray rather than his usual flamboyant patterns, his expression grave but composed. He began with a carefully crafted statement, I come before you today with a heavy heart, addressing allegations that have understandably disturbed our community. The welfare of Harry Potter has always been my paramount concern, from the tragic night his parents were murdered to this very moment. Did I place him with his Muggle relatives? Yes, to activate powerful blood protections his mother created through her sacrifice. Did I access Potter family vaults? Yes, to fund security measures, intelligence networks, and protective enchantments necessary during uncertain times when many Death Eaters remained at large. What I did not do, and would never do, is knowingly subject young Harry to mistreatment. Had I been aware of his living conditions, I would have intervened immediately. This represents my gravest failure, not in intention, but in monitoring. I do not contest the Wisengamot's decisions regarding Harry's guardianship or the financial audit. I welcome transparency and accept responsibility for oversights. My only wish now is to re-establish trust with Harry himself, to explain my decisions directly, and to support his transition into our world with whatever wisdom I can offer. Masterful, Augusta muttered as reporters began shouting questions. He's positioned himself as mistaken but well-intentioned, the grandfatherly figure who made a regrettable oversight. Convenient that a wizard powerful enough to detect magic across Britain couldn't detect a child sleeping in a cupboard, Amelia observed acidly. The questions ranged from skeptical to sympathetic, with Dumbledore handling each with practiced ease. He expressed profound regret over Harry's living conditions, acknowledged the appearance of impropriety in financial management, and repeatedly emphasized his willingness to cooperate with all investigations for Harry's benefit. When asked about Harry's emancipation, Dumbledore's response was particularly nuanced. While I respect the Wisengamot's decision, I worry about the burden of responsibility placed on such young shoulders. Harry deserves a childhood, the very thing denied him at Privet Drive. My concern is that emancipation, even limited, may further accelerate his loss of innocence. He's good, Harry admitted reluctantly. He sounds like he really cares about me. Decades of political maneuvering honed such skills, Ragnarok said. Note how he never directly addresses the will violation or explains why he never checked on you personally. As the press conference concluded, reporters pressed for Dumbledore's reaction to Harry's scheduled interview. I eagerly await Harry's perspective, Dumbledore replied with apparent sincerity. Understanding how he experienced these events is essential to reconciliation. I only hope he knows that despite mistakes made, my concern for his welfare has never wavered. The crystal's image faded as Dumbledore left the podium, reporters shouting final questions that went unanswered. Round 1 to Dumbledore, Augusta declared grimly. He's positioned himself perfectly as the remorseful guardian who made mistakes of oversight rather than malice. The financial evidence still stands, Griphook countered. No amount of grandfatherly concern explains 26 billion galleons. True, but public opinion isn't governed by ledgers, Amelia said. It responds to narratives, and Dumbledore just presented a compelling one, the great wizard so focused on protecting Harry from external threats that he overlooked household dynamics. Harry had listened quietly, absorbing the adult's analysis. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. He wants to meet with me. Maybe I should agree. The three adults exchanged glances. That would be risky, Amelia said carefully. Dumbledore is persuasive even without legitimacy. But declining makes me look afraid or unreasonable, Harry pointed out. If he's offering reconciliation and I refuse, I become the stubborn child. The boy has political instincts, Augusta remarked with approval. He's right about the optics. If, and I stress if, such a meeting occurs, it must be carefully controlled, Griphook insisted. Neutral location, multiple witnesses, time limitations, and preliminary occlumency training. I could host at DMLE headquarters, Amelia suggested. Official ground but not Dumbledore's territory. They discussed logistics for another hour before agreeing on conditions for a potential meeting. Harry would consider the possibility after Sirius Black's hearing, which might change the political landscape significantly if Harry's godfather proved innocent. The remainder of the day passed with Harry continuing his magical studies, making particularly good progress on defensive charms. Griphook introduced the shield charm, Protego, which was normally taught to third-year Hogwarts students. Technically advanced for your age, the Goblin admitted, but given potential threats, worth attempting. Harry's first efforts produced only faint, flickering barriers, but by evening, he could generate a shield stable enough to deflect minor jinxes. The work exhausted him magically, however, leaving him barely able to keep his eyes open through dinner. Magical core development resembles physical muscle growth, Griphook explained as Harry yawned over his shepherd's pie. Each exertion expands capacity, but requires recovery time. Like exercise, Harry mumbled sleepily. Precisely. Your core is unusually strong for your age but still developing. Rest is essential. Harry needed no further encouragement. He fell asleep almost instantly after reaching his bedroom, the day's events, interview, Dumbledore's press conference, shield charm practice, blurring together in his tired mind. Morning brought the promised Daily Prophet headline, Potter Speaks, I lived in a cupboard while Dumbledore took my gold. The article featured Harry's official photograph alongside the Potter crest, with his statement presented in a highlighted box. Skeeter had embellished liberally around his direct quotes, describing him as hauntingly reminiscent of his fallen father, with his mother's sorrowful eyes reflecting unspeakable Muggle mistreatment. More concerning was her framing of the conflict as a David versus Goliath battle between a wronged orphan and the most powerful wizard of our age, complete with unsubstantiated claims about Dumbledore's lavish lifestyle funded by Potter gold. This isn't helpful, Harry said, frowning at the newspaper. It makes everything sound more dramatic and personal than it is. Welcome to Rita Skeeter journalism, Amelia sighed. At least your direct quotes remain accurate. A second article recounted Dumbledore's press conference, presenting his perspective in more measured terms. The juxtaposition created exactly the sensationalized narrative Harry had hoped to avoid. The public will choose sides based on preconceptions, Griphook observed. Those inclined to question authority will support you. Those who revere tradition and established figures will back Dumbledore. And tomorrow's hearing may shift that balance, Amelia added, checking her watch. Speaking of which, we should prepare. The Black case convenes at 10. Harry spent the morning reviewing what little he knew about Sirius Black, his father's best friend, his godfather, and his parents' alleged betrayer. The contradictions troubled him deeply. How could someone be both devoted friend and ultimate traitor? Imperious curse could explain it, Amelia suggested during their preparation. Or coercion through threats to loved ones. Without a trial or Veritasium questioning, we simply don't know. If he's innocent, Harry asked hesitantly, what happens? Legally? Immediate release, financial compensation for wrongful imprisonment, and potential restoration as your godfather, though your emancipation complicates that relationship. Amelia's expression softened. Personally, 7 years in Azkaban changes people, Harry. Even if innocent, Sirius Black won't be the same man who knew your parents. This sobering assessment tempered Harry's expectations as they prepared to attend the hearing via secure ministry portkey. Unlike the Wisengamot session, this would be a smaller proceeding with the Wisengamot Council of Magical Law, 12 senior members who handled criminal cases, presiding. Harry would attend as an interested party but wouldn't testify unless specifically requested. His presence alone, Amelia explained, would signal the importance of the case and ensure proper procedure. At precisely 9:45, Harry, Amelia, Augusta, and Griphook gathered in Potter Haven's entrance hall. Each held a corner of a plain parchment envelope, the portkey that would transport them directly to the ministry's secure arrival chamber. Remember, Amelia instructed, many will be seeing you in person for the first time. Maintain composure regardless of what happens. This hearing isn't about you, but your presence inevitably creates additional scrutiny. Harry nodded, stomach fluttering with nerves. I understand. Activating in 3, 2, 1. Harry felt a jerk behind his navel as the world dissolved into swirling color. Seconds later, they landed in a circular stone chamber, Harry staggering slightly before Griphook steadied him. Never enjoyed portkey travel myself, Augusta remarked dryly, adjusting her vulture-topped hat. Ministry officials awaited them, expressions ranging from curious to starstruck as they escorted the group through winding corridors to courtroom 3. Unlike the Grand Wisengamot chamber, this was a smaller, more severe space with stark wooden benches for observers and a central chair with chains that moved ominously of their own accord. As an interested party, Harry was seated in the front row alongside Amelia. Augusta took the long-bottom seat on the Council of Magical Law, while Griphook joined a small contingent of goblins in a designated non-human observers section, another unprecedented accommodation. The room gradually filled with ministry officials, reporters, kept to a restricted area at the back, and various observers with personal or professional interest in the case. At 10:05, a side door opened, and Albus Dumbledore entered. Despite his suspension from official positions, he remained influential enough to attend high-profile proceedings. He nodded politely to various council members, then spotted Harry in the front row. After a moment's hesitation, he approached. Harry, he said softly, blue eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. How wonderful to see you in person at last. You look remarkably like your father. With my mother's eyes, Harry completed automatically. So I've heard. Dumbledore's smile deepened. Indeed. I wonder if we might speak privately after these proceedings. There is much I wish to explain. Before Harry could respond, Amelia intervened smoothly. Any meeting would need to be formally arranged, Albus. Harry's legal status requires proper protocols. Of course, Dumbledore agreed amiably. I merely wish to express the possibility. The decision, naturally, remains Harry's. He moved away to take his seat, leaving Harry with mixed emotions. In person, Dumbledore seemed genuinely grandfatherly, his eyes kind, his manner gentle. It was difficult to reconcile this image with the man who had left him in a cupboard for 7 years. Don't let the twinkle fool you, Amelia murmured. That's his most effective political tool. At precisely 10 o'clock, the council members filed in, taking seats in a raised semicircle facing the chained chair. Bartemius Crouch Sr., head of International Magical Cooperation and former DMLE director, presided. Extraordinary hearing of the Council of Magical Law, he announced in clipped tones. Reviewing the case of Sirius Black, imprisoned in Azkaban November 1981 without formal trial. Bring in the prisoner. A door at the far end opened, and 2 Dementors, floating, hooded figures that emanated bone-chilling cold, escorted a gaunt, haggard man into the courtroom. Harry gasped involuntarily at the sight of the creatures, feeling happiness drain away merely from their proximity. Sirius Black himself barely resembled the handsome young man from Harry's photo album. His once thick black hair hung in matted tangles around a skull-like face. Prison robes hung from his emaciated frame. But his eyes, grey and sunken, remained alert, scanning the room until they locked on Harry. Recognition, shock, and something like joy flashed across the prisoner's ravaged features before the Dementors forced him into the chair. The chains immediately wound around his arms, binding him in place as the soul-sucking guards retreated to the doorway. Sirius Black, Crouch began formally, "You have been brought before this council to finally address charges that on November 1, 1981, you betrayed James and Lily Potter to the Dark Lord, resulting in their deaths, and subsequently murdered Peter Pettigrew along with 12 Muggle bystanders. How do you plead?" Black's voice emerged as a hoarse rasp, damaged from years of disuse or screaming. "Not guilty to all charges." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. "You claim innocence despite being found at the scene of Pettigrew's murder," laughing maniacally. Crouch demanded skeptically. "I was laughing," Black admitted, "but not because I'd killed anyone. I was laughing at the absurdity of being outsmarted by Peter Pettigrew, of all people." His haunted eyes found Harry again. "I never betrayed James and Lily. I would have died first." "Convenient claims," Crouch remarked coldly. "This council will determine truth through evidence and testimony. Administer Veritaserum." A ministry official approached Black with a small vial of clear liquid. 3 drops were placed on the prisoner's tongue, and his expression immediately slackened, eyes turning glassy. "State your full name," Crouch instructed. "Sirius Orion Black," came the flat, emotionless response characteristic of truth serum. "Were you the secret keeper for James and Lily Potter's Fidelius charm?" "No. I was initially chosen, but convinced James to switch to Peter Pettigrew at the last moment. I thought it was the perfect misdirection, everyone would expect me, no one would suspect Peter." A ripple of shock moved through the council members. "Did you betray the Potter's location to Lord Voldemort?" "No. Peter Pettigrew did." "Did you kill Peter Pettigrew and 12 Muggles on November 1, 1981? "No. Peter shouted that I had betrayed James and Lily, cut off his own finger, cast a blasting curse that killed the Muggles, then transformed into his animagus form, a rat, and escaped through the sewers." "Pettigrew was an animagus?" Crouch asked incredulously. "Yes. Unregistered. James, Peter, and I became animagi during our 5th year at Hogwarts to accompany Remus Lupin during his werewolf transformations." The questioning continued for another hour, revealing extraordinary details: the Marauder's illegal animagus transformations, Sirius a dog, James a stag, Peter a rat, Pettigrew's gradual distancing during the final year of the war, Sirius's actions on the night James and Lily died, including lending his motorcycle to Hagrid for Harry's transport, and his subsequent manhunt for Pettigrew that ended in the fatal confrontation. Throughout, Black maintained complete consistency, even under the most probing questions designed to trip up practiced liars. The Veritaserum left no room for deception. Eventually, Crouch called for deliberation. The council members conferred in hushed voices while the courtroom buzzed with stunned conversations. Harry sat frozen, overwhelmed by revelations that rewrote the history he'd only just learned. After 15 minutes, Crouch called for order. "The council has reached a unanimous decision. Based on testimony under Veritaserum, we find Sirius Orion Black not guilty of all charges. He is to be released immediately, with full restoration of rights and properties. The ministry will determine appropriate compensation for wrongful imprisonment." The chains binding Black retracted instantly. He slumped in the chair, tears streaming down his hollow cheeks. Furthermore, Crouch continued, "Peter Pettigrew is posthumously stripped of his Order of Merlin, and a warrant is issued for his arrest, dead or alive, with the annotation that he may be disguised as a rat animagus." Crouch's gavel struck with finality. "This hearing is concluded. Mr. Black, ministry healers await to assess your condition. Aurors will process your formal release." As officials moved to assist the newly exonerated man, his gaze locked on Harry again. With visible effort, he rose from the chair and took an unsteady step forward. "Harry," he croaked. "You look so much like James." "But with my mother's eyes," Harry finished, standing. "Hello, Sirius. I just learned about you a few days ago." Black's expression crumpled. "I've failed you. I should have been there. Should have raised you as James and Lily wanted." Amelia stepped forward. "Mr. Black, there will be time for reunions after medical evaluation. Harry isn't going anywhere. Promise?" Black asked, his voice breaking. "Promise I'll see him again soon." "I promise," Harry said firmly, moving past Amelia to stand before his godfather. "We have a lot to talk about." Impulsively, he extended his hand. Black stared at it for a moment, then grasped it with trembling fingers. "James's son," he whispered. "All grown up." Ministry healers arrived then, gently guiding Black toward a side chamber. He went reluctantly, looking back at Harry until the door closed behind him. The courtroom erupted in activity, reporters rushing to file stories, council members conferring urgently, observers discussing implications. Amelia guided Harry through a private exit to avoid the press frenzy. "That changes everything," Augusta declared when they reached a secure ministry office. "An innocent man in Azkaban for 7 years without trial? The political fallout will be massive." "And Dumbledore signed the imprisonment order," Griphook added pointedly. "Another black mark against his judgment." "To be fair," Amelia said, "many officials failed Black, myself included. The evidence appeared overwhelming, and those were chaotic days." "But Dumbledore was chief warlock," Harry pointed out. "Shouldn't he have ensured proper procedure?" "Yes," Amelia admitted. "That responsibility fell primarily to him." Their discussion was interrupted by a ministry aide bringing urgent news. Dumbledore had scheduled a press conference for that afternoon, apparently to address the Black revelation. Additionally, St. Mungo's healers had taken over Black's care and estimated at least a week of treatment before he could safely receive visitors. "He's requesting permission to write to Harry immediately," however, the aide reported. "Of course," Harry said before anyone could respond. Tell him I want to hear everything about my parents. And that I'm glad he's free." After the aide departed, they debated next steps. The Black exoneration created both opportunities and complications, a powerful ally in Harry's godfather, but also medical and psychological realities that required patience. "Sirius's testimony corroborates our position that Dumbledore made catastrophic errors in judgment," Augusta observed. "First placing you with abusive relatives, then imprisoning your rightful guardian without trial." "But Sirius couldn't have raised me immediately anyway," Harry realized. "He went after Pettigrew instead of staying with me that night." "A mistake he'll likely acknowledge," Amelia said. "Grief and rage drove him to vengeance rather than duty." They returned to Potter Haven via secure port key, where an anxious Tippy awaited news. As Harry explained the hearing's outcome, Alls began arriving with early editions of the Evening Prophet, its headline screaming, "Sirius Black innocent. Boy Who-Lived's godfather wrongfully imprisoned for 7 years." The article detailed the hearing's revelations, emphasizing the systemic failures that had denied Black proper justice. A separate sidebar specifically questioned Dumbledore's role as chief warlock in allowing the miscarriage of justice, drawing explicit parallels to his oversight failures regarding Harry's placement with the Dursleys. "Public opinion shifts further," Griphook observed with satisfaction. "Even Dumbledore's supporters must question these compounding errors." As predicted, Dumbledore's hastily arranged press conference attempted damage control. Via the Gringotts viewing crystal, they watched him express profound regret over Black's case, attributing the lack of trial to extraordinary circumstances and apparent certainty of guilt. He pledged to personally ensure Sirius receives every support in his recovery, and suggested his eventual reunion with Harry would begin healing wounds for both. "He's co-opting the narrative," Augusta noted critically. positioning himself as facilitator of your reconciliation with Sirius rather than the man who kept you apart. Harry barely heard her. His mind was fixed on Sirius, the broken man in that courtroom who had suffered 7 years of what must have been unimaginable torment, yet whose first coherent thought was concern for Harry. His parents' best friend. His godfather. A living connection to the family he'd never known. "I think," he said slowly, "I should write to Sirius tonight. And I think I should agree to meet with Dumbledore." The adults exchanged concerned glances. "Are you certain?" Amelia asked carefully. "There's no rush to face Dumbledore." "I'm certain," Harry said with growing confidence. "Dumbledore will keep maneuvering until he gets what he wants. Better to meet on our terms than let him control the situation." "The boy shows wisdom beyond his years," Augusta remarked approvingly. "Arrange it," Harry told Amelia. "With all the protections we discussed. I want to hear what he has to say for himself." That evening, Harry wrote 2 letters. The first, to Sirius, expressed joy at his exoneration, eagerness to meet properly, and hope for stories about his parents. The second, drafted with Griphook's assistance, went to Dumbledore, a formal acceptance of his meeting request, with specific conditions regarding location, attendees, and time limitations. As he sealed the letters, Harry felt a strange sense of destiny. In just over a week, he'd gone from unwanted burden to magical heir, from ignorant muggle-raised child to partially emancipated wizard, from lonely boy to someone with growing connections and allies. Tomorrow he would face the man who had shaped his life from the shadows. Whatever Dumbledore said, whatever justifications or apologies he offered, Harry approached the meeting with clear-eyed determination. The truth, his truth, had already shaken the wizarding world's foundations. Now he would look into the eyes of the man who had left him in that cupboard and judge for himself what kind of wizard Albus Dumbledore really was. Chapter 3, New Beginnings. 6 months had changed everything. Harry stood at the window of his study in Potter Manor, watching snow blanket the extensive grounds. January had arrived with bitter cold and pristine white landscapes that transformed the property into something from a fairy tale. Not that Harry had been allowed many fairy tales at the Dursleys. Young master should wear a jumper, Tippy fussed, appearing with a soft crack. The blue one Miss Hermione's mother sent for Christmas. "Thanks, Tippy." Harry slipped on the hand-knit jumper, marveling again at how different life had become. 6 months ago, he'd been sleeping in a cupboard. Now he had multiple properties, friends who sent Christmas gifts, and a growing magical education that his tutors called exceptional. He turned from the window to the parchment spread across his desk, preparation materials for today's momentous events. The Wizengamot trial of Albus Dumbledore would begin at 10, with Harry scheduled to testify at 11. His stomach twisted at the thought. "Master Harry's godfather has arrived," Tippy announced, ears quivering with excitement. "He's in the blue sitting room with Director Ragnarok." Harry hurried downstairs, taking the grand staircase 2 steps at a time despite Madame Blackwell's etiquette lessons about proper air deportment. Some habits from his cupboard days remained, like moving quickly before opportunities disappeared. Sirius Black stood as Harry entered, opening his arms for their customary hug. The man barely resembled the skeletal prisoner Harry had first seen 6 months ago. Intensive healing at St. Mungo's, followed by specialized mind-healing treatments in Switzerland, had worked wonders. His face had filled out, his hair was neatly trimmed, and though shadows lingered behind his eyes, genuine warmth shone through when he smiled. "There's my favorite godson." Sirius embraced him tightly. "I'm your only godson," Harry replied automatically, their running joke. "Technicalities." Sirius ruffled his hair. "Ready for the big day?" "Both big days, actually." Harry nodded, glancing at Ragnarok who sat reviewing documents by the fireplace. "As ready as I'll ever be." The big days Sirius referenced were interconnected events that would reshape Harry's future. Today, Dumbledore's trial would finally address the financial theft and guardianship violations that had upended Harry's life 6 months prior. Tomorrow, assuming the trial concluded as expected, Harry would undergo the formal emancipation ceremony combined with the Potter family magical inheritance ritual, traditionally performed when heirs turned 17, but accelerated due to Harry's unique circumstances. "How was your meeting with the mind healer yesterday?" Harry asked as they sat down. Sirius made a face. "Productive but exhausting. We're still working through the Azkaban trauma." He brightened. "But I'm cleared for partial guardianship duties starting next week, which means we can finally begin those weekend visits we talked about." This news delighted Harry. While his emancipation meant no one would have full guardianship over him again, Sirius would serve as his primary magical guardian, responsible for overseeing his education and providing guidance without controlling his finances or properties. "Perfect timing with Grimmauld Place renovations finishing," Harry said. "Though I still don't understand why you wanted to restore that gloomy old place instead of just moving in here." "Family obligation," Sirius shrugged. "The Black legacy needs redemption as much as the name does. Besides, you need your own space to grow into your role as head of House Potter." Ragnock cleared his throat. "Speaking of roles and responsibilities, we should review today's procedures before departing for the ministry." For the next half hour, they discussed Harry's testimony, what questions to expect, how to address the Wizengamot, and which details carried the most legal weight. This wasn't Harry's first appearance before the wizard government. Over the past months, he'd testified in preliminary hearings and submitted multiple sworn statements. But today's testimony would be the cornerstone of the prosecution's case against Dumbledore. "Remember," Ragnock instructed, "focus on facts and direct experiences, not interpretations. Let your account of living conditions at the Dursleys stand on its own merits. The prosecution will connect those conditions to Dumbledore's negligence." "And if he does that twinkly-eyed grandfatherly thing?" Harry asked, recalling his one carefully supervised meeting with Dumbledore 3 months prior. "Look at his forehead, not his eyes," Sirius advised. "Prevents both emotional manipulation and potential legitimacy. Though your occlumency shield should hold against passive probing," Ragnock added with approval. Harry nodded. The basic occlumency training he'd undertaken had been challenging but essential, creating mental barriers that would prevent magical intrusion into his thoughts. He wasn't skilled enough to withstand a determined attack, but he could detect and deflect subtle attempts at mental influence. At 9 o'clock, Amelia Bones arrived via Floo, wearing formal DMLE robes and looking uncharacteristically tense. "Good morning," she greeted them. "The ministry is chaotic already. International press has descended, security is heightened, and protesters from both sides are gathering in the atrium." "Both sides?" Harry questioned. "Pro-Dumbledore supporters claiming this is a political witch hunt, and those demanding justice for your mistreatment," she explained. "We'll bypass the public areas, fortunately." Their group departed via secured ministry port key, landing directly in a preparation room adjacent to the Wizengamot chambers. Augusta Longbottom awaited them, her vulture hat replaced by the formal silver headpiece of a Wizengamot elder. "The full body has convened," she informed them. 77 members present, the largest attendance since the Death Eater trials. "Has Dumbledore arrived?" Sirius asked. "With a full entourage," Augusta confirmed grimly. "Minerva McGonagall, Phileas Flitwick, and several former students in prominent positions. He's making a show of support." This news didn't surprise Harry. Over the past 6 months, Dumbledore had orchestrated a careful rehabilitation campaign, expressing deep remorse over Harry's circumstances, framing his actions as well-intentioned but flawed, and emphasizing his decades of service to the wizarding world. He retained his position as Hogwarts headmaster, though his international titles remained suspended. "The strategy hasn't changed," Ragnock stated firmly. "The financial evidence is irrefutable. No amount of character witnesses can explain away 26 billion galleons." Augusta nodded. "Precisely why we've structured the prosecution to begin with financial documentation before addressing guardianship violations. Even Dumbledore's staunchest supporters struggle to justify the systematic draining of an orphan's inheritance." At precisely 10 o'clock, they were escorted into the Wizengamot chamber through a private entrance. Harry's appearance created an immediate stir despite his prior appearances. Whispers rippled through the visitor galleries, reporters leaned forward eagerly, and even some Wizengamot members turned to stare. Harry understood their reaction. He'd changed significantly in 6 months. No longer the undersized, malnourished boy in broken glasses, he now stood taller, healthier, and more confident. His custom robes bore subtle Potter family emblems, his posture reflected Madame Blackwell's relentless deportment training, and the training wand holstered at his wrist signified his ongoing magical education. The prosecution team, led by Tiberius Ogden himself, given the case's magnitude, greeted them at their designated seating area. Across the chamber sat Dumbledore with his defenders, including Elphias Doge, a silver-haired wizard known as Dumbledore's oldest friend, and several barristers specializing in financial law. Dumbledore himself appeared serenely unconcerned, dressed in relatively subdued purple robes. When he noticed Harry's entrance, he inclined his head slightly in acknowledgement. Harry responded with a precisely calculated nod, neither hostile nor friendly. Acting Chief Warlock Griselda Marchbanks, a tiny, ancient witch with formidable reputation, called the session to order. "These proceedings will address 2 interconnected cases," she announced, her magically amplified voice cutting through all murmurs. "First, financial misconduct charges against Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore regarding the Potter estate. Second, guardianship violations resulting in endangerment of a minor. The accused has pleaded not guilty to all charges." She fixed the chamber with a stern glare. "Given the high-profile nature of these proceedings, I remind all present that outbursts will result in immediate removal. We begin with the prosecution's opening statements." Ogden approached the central platform, his expression grave as he outlined the case. The financial charges came first, detailed records showing systematic withdrawals beginning hours after James and Lily Potter's deaths, continuing until Harry's Gringotts inheritance test 6 months ago. "These weren't occasional withdrawals for legitimate expenses," Ogden emphasized. "They were calculated, regular transfers designed to gradually drain the Potter fortune while avoiding detection thresholds. Over 26 billion galleons diverted through shell companies, questionable investments, and outright gifts to Dumbledore's associates." Ogden activated a magical projection showing timelines and transaction records. "Note the pattern, large withdrawals following Wizengamot votes where Dumbledore faced opposition, funds directed to businesses owned by families who subsequently supported his policies, charitable donations to organizations that employed his former students in suspiciously well-paid positions." The evidence presentation continued for over an hour, each revelation more damning than the last. Property transfers, artifact borrowings that became permanent, investment accounts redirected to Dumbledore's personal ventures, the pattern was unmistakable once presented comprehensively. Throughout, Dumbledore maintained his composed expression, occasionally conferring quietly with his legal team but showing no outward distress. When Ogden finally concluded the financial presentation, he shifted to the second set of charges, the guardianship violations. Beyond financial exploitation, Albus Dumbledore fundamentally failed in his most basic duty as magical guardian, ensuring Harry Potter's safety and well-being. Ogden's voice hardened. Despite specific prohibitions in the Potter will, which Dumbledore witnessed personally, he placed the infant Harry with Petunia and Vernon Dursley, muggles known to despise magic. He activated another projection showing the cupboard under Privet Drive stairs. For 6 years, Harry Potter, heir to an ancient and noble house, the child credited with defeating the darkest wizard of our time, slept here. Not in a bedroom. Not in a proper bed. In a cupboard meant for cleaning supplies. Murmurs of shock rippled through even those who had heard this detail before. Seeing the actual cupboard, its cramped dimensions, the thin mattress, the cobwebs in corners, had powerful impact. "The prosecution calls Harry James Potter," Ogden announced. Harry rose, his heart pounding despite months of preparation. As he walked to the witness stand, he felt the weight of hundreds of eyes following his every move. The magical oath was administered, a simplified version appropriate for his age, binding him to honesty without the severe consequences an adult oath would carry. "Mr. Potter," Ogden began gently, "could you describe your living arrangements at the Dursley household?" Harry took a deep breath, focusing on facts rather than emotions as he practiced. "From my earliest memory until age 7, I slept in the cupboard under the stairs at number 4 Privet Drive. My cousin Dudley had 2 bedrooms, one for sleeping and one for toys he'd broken. When visitors came, I was told to stay in my cupboard and make no noise, or there would be no meals for a week." "Were you actually denied food as punishment?" "Yes, regularly," Harry confirmed. "For accidental magic, for better grades than Dudley, for looking funny at Uncle Vernon. The longest was 4 days, though Aunt Petunia usually sneaked me some bread and water after 2 days so I wouldn't get sick and cause questions." The questioning continued methodically, establishing Harry's treatment, the excessive chores, Dudley's Harry hunting games, verbal abuse from his aunt and uncle, the complete suppression of any information about magic or his parents. Throughout, Harry maintained the calm, factual delivery Ragnarok had coached, though several Wisengamot members appeared increasingly disturbed. "During those 7 years," Ogden asked finally, "did Albus Dumbledore ever visit you at Privet Drive?" "Never." "Did any wizard or witch identifying themselves as sent by Dumbledore check on your welfare?" "No." "Were you aware that Dumbledore had appointed himself your magical guardian?" "No. Until the goblins found me, I didn't know magic existed. I thought my parents died in a car crash while drunk." This last statement caused visible reaction among even Dumbledore's supporters. To deny the heroic deaths of Lily and James Potter, to reduce their sacrifice to a drunken accident, struck at widely held wizarding values. Ogden nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mr. Potter. No further questions." Dumbledore's lead defender, a sharp-featured witch named Irene Hawkworth, approached for cross-examination. Her tone was carefully modulated, respectful but skeptical. "Mr. Potter, you've described distressing circumstances, and I don't wish to minimize them. However, I must ask, did your relatives ever strike you directly?" Harry considered carefully. "Uncle Vernon grabbed me roughly. Aunt Petunia swung a frying pan at my head once but missed. They encouraged Dudley's bullying but rarely hit me themselves. They preferred other methods." "Could those methods be described as neglect rather than abuse?" "Objection," Ogden called. "Asking the witness to make legal distinctions inappropriate for his age." "Sustained," Marchbanks ruled. "Rephrase, Madam Hawkworth." The cross-examination continued with attempts to minimize the Dursleys' treatment, suggesting they were strict rather than abusive, frugal rather than neglectful. Harry maintained his composure, neither embellishing nor downplaying his experiences. Finally, Hawkworth shifted approach. "Mr. Potter, in your current circumstances, wealthy, partially emancipated, receiving specialized education, would you say you've ultimately benefited from your unique upbringing?" Harry's eyes narrowed slightly. "If you're asking whether living in a cupboard for 7 years was worth eventually learning I was rich, the answer is no. I would trade every galleon in my vaults to have grown up with parents who loved me, or with my godfather who wanted me, or with any magical family who would have told me the truth about who I am." His voice remained level, but emotion simmered beneath. "The only benefit of my upbringing was learning early that adults don't always protect children, that positions of authority can be misused, and that sometimes you have to save yourself because no one else will." The chamber fell completely silent. Even Hawkworth seemed momentarily speechless before recovering. No further questions. Harry returned to his seat, feeling drained but satisfied. Sirius squeezed his shoulder supportively. "Perfect," he whispered. "Couldn't have done better myself." The prosecution continued with testimony from Petunia Dursley herself, brought reluctantly via ministry escort, looking deeply uncomfortable in the magical surroundings. Her testimony proved surprisingly damaging to Dumbledore's case, as she revealed he had left infant Harry on their doorstep in November with only a letter of explanation. "No consultation," she sniffed. No asking if we wanted another child. Just a basket on our step in November, for heaven's sake. Could have frozen to death before we found him in the morning. When questioned about their treatment of Harry, she became defensive. We never asked for him. Never wanted a magical child disrupting our normal life. The letter said he needed to stay with blood relatives for protection, but we weren't given any choice in the matter. Did Albus Dumbledore ever check on Harry personally? Ogden pressed. Never saw the man, Petunia confirmed. Some odd folks in the neighborhood watching the house sometimes, that batty cat Lady Fig and others, but no one ever asked how the boy was treated. No one cared as long as we kept him. After Petunia's dismissal, the prosecution called a series of expert witnesses, child welfare specialists, mind healers who had evaluated Harry, and financial forensics experts who traced the money trail. By late afternoon, the case against Dumbledore appeared overwhelming. Finally, Dumbledore himself took the stand. Unlike previous hearings where he'd appeared grandfatherly and slightly wounded, today he projected dignified sobriety, a man facing serious charges with appropriate gravity. Under questioning from his defense team, Dumbledore outlined his version of events, placing Harry with blood relatives to activate powerful protective magic from Lily's sacrifice, establishing monitoring charms for magical threats rather than daily welfare, appointing Squib liaison Arabella Fig to observe from a distance, and most controversially, diverting Potter funds for a complex, multi-layered security network designed to protect both Harry and the wizarding world from dark forces. That remained active. The financial management was unorthodox, Dumbledore acknowledged, but driven by extraordinary circumstances. Lord Voldemort's defeat was incomplete, a fact known to very few at the time. Harry required protection beyond conventional measures, and those measures required resources beyond ministry budgets. When Ogden took over for cross-examination, his approach was surgical. These security measures, he began, did they include renovations to your brother's pub in Hogsmeade, financed with 300,000 galleons from the Potter business vault in 1983? Dumbledore hesitated fractionally. The Three Broomsticks serves as a central information-gathering hub. Renovations included secure meeting rooms and communication systems for operatives. And the villa purchased in southern France for 1.2 million galleons in 1985? A safe house for endangered allies and a potential evacuation location for Harry if needed. Ogden continued methodically through dozens of expenditures, each more difficult to justify than the last. The pattern became clear, reasonable-sounding explanations individually, but collectively revealing systematic exploitation. Finally, Professor Dumbledore, Ogden concluded, regardless of intentions, do you acknowledge that you never personally checked Harry Potter's living conditions during 7 years as his magical guardian? Dumbledore's expression showed genuine regret. I acknowledge this grievous oversight. My focus on external threats blinded me to household dynamics I should have monitored more closely. And do you acknowledge placing him with the Dursleys violated James and Lily Potter's explicitly stated wishes in their will? I believed emergency conditions justified setting aside certain provisions, Dumbledore replied carefully. Blood protection offered security no other arrangement could provide. Even if that protection came at the cost of Harry Potter's physical and emotional well-being. Ogden pressed. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I made decisions I believed necessary for the greater good. With hindsight, I recognize some were flawed. The day's proceedings concluded with Dumbledore still under examination. As the Wisengamot adjourned until morning, Harry felt emotionally exhausted but relieved his testimony was complete. You were magnificent, Augusta told him as they gathered their things. Clear, factual, and dignified, exactly what was needed. Dumbledore's slipping, Sirius observed. That greater good comment was a strategic error. It reinforces the perception he sacrificed your welfare for abstract principles. They returned to Potter Manor via secure flow, bypassing the media frenzy at the ministry. After a quiet dinner, Harry retreated to his study to decompress through what had become his favorite activity, practical magic. 6 months of intensive training had accelerated his magical development dramatically. With his training wand, he could now perform most standard first-year Hogwarts spells and many second-year charms. His particular strengths had emerged in defense against the dark arts and transfiguration, his father's specialties, according to Sirius. Harry worked through a series of increasingly complex transfigurations, converting buttons to beetles and back again. The precision work calmed his mind after the emotional strain of the day. He was attempting to change a teacup into a tortoise when Sirius knocked on the doorframe. "Not bad," his godfather commented, watching the teacup sprout legs and a head. James would be impressed. He didn't manage animate transfiguration until second year. Harry beamed at the praise. "Professor Whitwick says I have natural talent for visualization." "You've got your mother's focus and your father's magical strength," Sirius said, sitting in a nearby armchair. "Deadly combination." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Sirius spoke again. "Tomorrow's a big day, pup. The emancipation ceremony and inheritance ritual are serious magic. How are you feeling about it?" Harry considered the question. "Nervous but ready. Ragnarok says I'm the youngest to attempt the inheritance ritual in centuries, but my magical core tests show I can handle it." "The Potters have always been magically powerful," Sirius confirmed. "James could produce a corporeal Patronus by 5th year, extremely advanced magic." "I've been reading about patron uses," Harry said eagerly. "Professor Whitwick thinks I might be able to attempt one by summer." Sirius laughed. "Always pushing boundaries, just like your dad." His expression grew more serious. "The inheritance ritual will accelerate your magical development even further. The Potter family magics are ancient and powerful, they'll recognize you as head of house despite your age." "Will it hurt?" Harry asked, voicing the concern he'd kept private. "Not hurt exactly," Sirius said thoughtfully. "More like, intense pressure. Your magic expanding to accommodate the family magic joining with your core." He squeezed Harry's shoulder. "I'll be right there the whole time. So will Ragnarok and Amelia." This reassurance calmed Harry's lingering anxiety. After Sirius left, he practiced for another hour before bed, knowing tomorrow would demand his full magical strength. The second day of Dumbledore's trial began with closing arguments. Harry arrived at the ministry with his usual entourage, feeling more centered than yesterday. The prosecution summarized their case methodically, financial evidence first, then guardianship violations, connecting both to demonstrate a pattern of control and exploitation. Dumbledore's defense emphasized his decades of service, the extraordinary circumstances following Voldemort's defeat, and his willingness to make difficult decisions others would avoid. His legal team conceded administrative oversights, but maintained that all actions were fundamentally protective in nature. By mid-morning, the Wizengamot retired for deliberation. Harry, Sirius, and their allies moved to a private waiting room, joined by Neville and Augusta Longbottom, the Grangers, and Susan Bones with her aunt. "How long will deliberations take?" Hermione asked, glancing at the magical clock on the wall. "Impossible to predict," Amelia replied. "Given the complexity and the defendant's stature, possibly hours." In fact, deliberation took just 90 minutes, surprisingly quick for such a high-profile case. When they reconvened in the Wizengamot chamber, tension hung palpably in the air. Dumbledore stood before the central platform, appearing composed but perhaps slightly paler than usual. Chief Warlock Marchbanks called for silence. "Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore, this body has considered the evidence presented regarding financial misconduct and guardianship violations. On the first count, financial misconduct constituting theft and misappropriation of Potter family assets, the Wizengamot finds you guilty." A collective intake of breath swept the chamber. On the second count, guardianship violations resulting in child endangerment, the Wizengamot finds you guilty. Whispers erupted despite Marchbanks' call for order. Harry sat perfectly still, emotions swirling beneath his carefully controlled expression. After months of hearings, investigations, and public debate, the verdict confirmed what he'd known since that first blood test at Gringotts: Dumbledore had failed him, deliberately and systematically. The Wisengamot will now determine appropriate penalties, Marchbanks continued when order was restored. Given the defendant's age, previous service record, and cooperation with investigation, incarceration has been deemed inappropriate. Harry wasn't surprised. Few had expected Dumbledore to face prison time, regardless of the verdict. Instead, the following sanctions are imposed: first, full financial restitution to the Potter estate, including all diverted funds, property, and artifacts, plus statutory penalties totaling approximately 30 billion galleons. This effectively eliminated most of Dumbledore's personal wealth, a significant punishment for financial crimes. Second, permanent removal from all positions of financial authority over minors, including school fund management and guardianship capacities. This restriction would impact his role at Hogwarts, requiring oversight for all financial decisions. Third, probationary status as Hogwarts headmaster for a period of 5 years, with quarterly reviews by the Board of Governors and restrictions on unilateral student welfare decisions. This represented a significant diminishment of Dumbledore's autonomy at the school, a halfway measure between removal and retention. Finally, mandatory retirement from all remaining political positions, including the Wisengamot seat held by the Dumbledore family for 12 generations. This last penalty drew audible gasps. Hereditary Wisengamot seats were rarely suspended, even temporarily. Permanent removal represented an extraordinary statement about Dumbledore's betrayal of trust. Does the convicted wish to address the body before sentencing is finalized? Marchbanks asked. Dumbledore stepped forward, his expression solemn. I accept the Wisengamot's judgment with humility. While my intentions were protective, my methods were flawed, and for that, I express profound regret. To young Harry especially, I offer sincere apology for hardship suffered under my guardianship. He turned slightly toward Harry. I hope in time you might understand, if not forgive, the decisions made in difficult circumstances. The threats that necessitated such measures remain, though dormant. I pray those now guiding you recognize dangers I perhaps overestimated. The statement walked a careful line, acknowledging wrongdoing while subtly suggesting his actions had some justification future events might validate. Harry maintained eye contact with Dumbledore's forehead rather than his eyes, revealing nothing. Sentencing is confirmed, Marchbanks declared, striking her gavel. This body stands adjourned. The aftermath was controlled chaos, reporters shouting questions, photographers' flashes illuminating the chamber, Wisengamot members conferring in clusters. Harry was escorted through a side exit by Amelia and Sirius, bypassing the media frenzy. A fair verdict, Ragnarok commented when they reached the private ministry chamber. The financial penalties are particularly satisfying. The probationary headmaster status seems inadequate, Sirius grumbled. After what he did, he shouldn't be anywhere near children. Politics, Augusta sighed. Too many feared the disruption complete removal would cause. This compromise maintains stability while significantly restricting his authority. Harry absorbed these assessments silently, his thoughts already turning to the afternoon ceremony. The trial's conclusion represented closure on one chapter of his life, the emancipation and inheritance rituals would begin another. After a light lunch, their group traveled to Gringotts via special ministry transport. Unlike the public banking areas Harry had first visited months ago, today they descended to ancient ritual chambers deep beneath London, spaces reserved for the most significant Goblin ceremonies. The circular chamber they entered featured polished obsidian walls inlaid with silver runes. In the center stood a raised dais with 2 concentric circles etched into the stone, the inner for Harry, the outer for witnesses. Torches with blue flames provided the only illumination, casting everything in ethereal light. A delegation of senior goblins awaited them, led by Ragnarok in formal regalia Harry had never seen, armor of some silvery metal over ceremonial robes, with a circlet of office adorning his head. Harry James Potter, Ragnarok greeted formally. You come seeking recognition as head of the ancient and noble house of Potter through accelerated emancipation and inheritance ritual. Are you prepared to receive your family's legacy? "I am," Harry replied, the ritual response Griphook had taught him. "The human ministry has granted legal emancipation," Ragnarok continued, gesturing to Amelia who held official parchments. "We now seek acknowledgement from older powers, from magic itself." Harry followed instructions, taking position in the inner circle while his supporters, Sirius, Amelia, Augusta, Neville, and Hermione, invited as representatives of different aspects of wizarding society, positioned themselves around the outer circle. Ragnarok approached with a silver knife and shallow stone basin similar to the one used for Harry's original inheritance test. 3 drops freely given," he intoned. Harry extended his hand without hesitation. The knife pricked his finger, and 3 drops of blood fell into the basin, sizzling upon contact with the ancient stone. The Goblin director began chanting in gobbledygook, the harsh syllables echoing off obsidian walls. Other goblins joined the chant, creating complex harmonies that seemed to vibrate in Harry's bones. The blood in the basin began to glow, then rose into the air, forming symbols identical to those from his first blood test, but now they burned with blue fire. "Magic acknowledges blood," Ragnarok proclaimed in English. "Harry James Potter, son of James Fleamont Potter and Lily Evans Potter, stands confirmed as last living heir to the Potter lineage." The floating symbols began to spin slowly, forming a vortex of blue flame that descended toward Harry. He fought the instinct to step back, remembering Sirius's assurance that the ritual wouldn't harm him. As the magical flames touched his head, Harry gasped. Not pain, but intense pressure, as if he were diving deep underwater. The magic flowed over him, through him, seeking something. "Magic seeks worthiness," Ragnarok's voice seemed distant. "Open yourself to judgment." Harry closed his eyes, willing himself to accept whatever came. Memories flashed behind his eyelids, covered darkness, Dudley's taunts, discovering magic existed, facing Dumbledore across the courtroom, practicing spells late into night, forging friendships with Neville and Hermione. The pressure intensified until Harry thought he might collapse. Then suddenly, gloriously, it transformed into pure energy surging through his veins. His eyes flew open, and he saw his body outlined in golden light, the blue flames having transformed upon acceptance. "Magic finds worthy," Ragnarok declared triumphantly. "The Potter family magic accepts its heir." The golden energy condensed, flowing into Harry's chest where it settled like a warm coal next to his heart. He felt different. Stronger. More connected to something ancient and powerful. "By the authority of Gringotts Bank, the Goblin Nation, and magic itself," Ragnarok continued, "I recognize Harry James Potter as emancipated head of House Potter, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereof." He presented Harry with a platinum ring bearing the Potter crest, a shield with a griffin rampant over crossed wands. The head of house ring, worn by Potter lords for 15 generations. It carries protective enchantments and serves as a key to family properties and vaults. Harry slipped the ring onto his right hand. It resized instantly, fitting perfectly and briefly glowing with the same golden light that had surrounded him. "Rise, Lord Potter," Ragnarok proclaimed. As Harry stood, the witnesses began a slow, ritualistic clapping that built to enthusiastic applause. Sirius was beaming with pride, while Hermione looked fascinated by the ancient magic they'd witnessed. Even Neville, usually reserved, was grinning widely. "How do you feel?" Sirius asked when Harry stepped from the inner circle. "Different," Harry admitted. "Like I suddenly have access to something. More magic or energy. The family magic has joined with your core," Ragnarok explained. "It will enhance your natural abilities and grant access to Potter-specific spells and protections. These will reveal themselves gradually as you mature." Following the ritual came the legal components, signing magically binding documents that formalized Harry's emancipation, established Sirius as his advisory magical guardian, and confirmed Amelia's continued role as legal liaison until Harry turned 11. "The ministry paperwork is the boring part," Sirius stage whispered, making Harry smile despite the formality of the occasion. Once the documentation was complete, Ragnar led them to a formal meeting room where Goblin servers had prepared a celebratory meal. As they ate, Harry received his first formal briefing as head of House Potter. Your estate now stands at approximately 29 billion galleons with Dumbledore's restitution, Ragnar reported. Properties include Potter Manor, Potter Haven, 3 international residences, and numerous business holdings. You also control voting shares in 12 major wizarding companies and hold minority interest in 32 others. The numbers remained somewhat abstract to Harry despite 6 months of financial education. More meaningful was the responsibility that came with such resources. I'd like to move forward with the foundation, he said decisively. The one we discussed last month. Ragnar nodded approvingly. The Lily Potter Foundation for Magical Children. The paperwork awaits your signature as head of house. Harry had conceived the foundation after learning how few support systems existed for magical orphans and muggle-born children. With an initial endowment of 50 million galleons, the foundation would provide scholarships, early magical education, and housing assistance for children like himself who lost parents in the war, or like Hermione who discovered magic early with no support structure. We'll need a board of directors, Harry continued, warming to the topic. People from different backgrounds who understand different needs. An excellent first act as head of house, Augusta commented. Demonstrates both compassion and political acumen. After the celebration at Gringotts, they returned to Potter Manor where Tippy had organized another, less formal gathering. The Weasley family, whom Harry had met through ministry functions, arrived with their children. Ron, close to Harry's age, and the twins Fred and George had become occasional playmates during supervised visits. The Tonks family also attended, Ted, Andromeda, and their daughter Nymphadora, a metamorphmagus Hogwarts student who entertained younger children by changing her nose into animal shapes. Through Sirius, Andromeda, his cousin, had reconnected with her disowned family, creating another link to Harry's growing support network. As the celebration continued into evening, Harry slipped away briefly to his study, overwhelmed by the day's emotions and needing a moment alone. He stood before the window, watching stars appear over Potter Manor's grounds, and felt the weight of the ring on his finger, physical symbol of all that had changed. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mind some company? Sirius asked from the doorway. Harry smiled. Never from you. Sirius joined him at the window. Quite a day, huh? Convicted a Dark Lord manipulator and became a head of house before dinner. Harry chuckled despite himself. When you put it that way. Your parents would be bursting with pride, Sirius said softly. James especially, watching you take up the family mantle with such dignity. Lily would be planning that foundation expansion before the ink dried on the first charter. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment before Sirius continued. With the trial concluded and your emancipation official, we need to discuss next steps. Particularly your education. Harry nodded. This had been an ongoing discussion for months. The Hogwarts Board of Governors meeting is next week. Are you sure about attending? Sirius asked. With Dumbledore still headmaster, albeit restricted? I need to see the castle, meet the professors, understand the environment, Harry explained. Besides, I won't attend for 3 years anyway. A lot can change by then. Sirius squeezed his shoulder. Always thinking ahead. You got that from Lily. When they rejoined the party, Harry found himself drawn into a game of exploding snap with Ron, Neville, and the Weasley twins. The normalcy of children playing provided perfect counterbalance to the day's weighty ceremonies. Later, as guests began departing, Hermione approached with a book-shaped package. I almost forgot to give you this. It's for your emancipation. I couldn't find cards for that occasion in Flourish and Blots. Harry unwrapped it to find Advanced Magical Theory for the Ambitious Student, exactly the sort of gift he'd expect from his academically minded friend. It explains why spells work the way they do, she explained eagerly. Not just wand movements and incantations, but the underlying principles. I thought since you're advancing so quickly. It's perfect, Harry assured her. Maybe we can study it together during our next session. Their twice-weekly study group had become a highlight of Harry's schedule. Neville, Hermione, Susan Bones, and occasionally Ron Weasley gathered with tutors to learn magical theory and, for those with permission like Harry, practice basic spellwork. The group balanced different strengths: Neville's herbology knowledge, Hermione's theoretical understanding, Susan's practical ministry perspective, Ron's strategic thinking, and Harry's raw magical power. As the last guests departed, Harry found himself emotionally exhausted but deeply content. In 6 months, he'd gone from isolated cupboard dweller to the center of a growing network of friends, allies, and mentors. The transformation seemed almost as magical as the spells he was learning. "Early night, I think," Sirius suggested, noting Harry's fatigue. "Tomorrow's meeting with the Hogwarts board will require sharp wits." Harry nodded, bidding goodnight to remaining guests before heading upstairs. Despite exhaustion, he took time for his nightly magical practice, a discipline he'd maintained religiously since receiving his training wand. The inheritance ritual had indeed changed something fundamental. Spells that had required concentration yesterday flowed effortlessly tonight. His Lumos charm shone twice as bright, his levitation lifted heavier objects with greater precision, his transfigurations held form longer. Excited by these developments, Harry attempted a spell he'd been practicing without success for weeks, the disillusionment charm that created partial invisibility. Previously, he'd managed only slight transparency of target objects. Tonight, the quill he practiced on disappeared completely from view. "Remarkable," came Professor Whitwick's voice from the doorway. The elderly wizard who served as Harry's primary magical tutor had stayed after the celebration to observe the effects of the inheritance ritual. "The family magic has significantly enhanced your capabilities. It feels different," Harry tried to explain. "Like before I was pushing magic through a narrow tube, but now it flows through a wider channel." An apt description of magical core expansion, Whitwick nodded approvingly. "At this rate, you'll have mastered the entire first-year Hogwarts curriculum before summer." This prediction pleased Harry immensely. While he valued his unique educational arrangement, private tutors, personalized curriculum, integration of magical and muggle subjects, he still measured progress against Hogwarts standards. After Whitwick departed, Harry attempted one final spell before bed, the shield charm he'd been struggling to maintain consistently. Tonight, the shield sprang into existence with unprecedented strength, a shimmering blue dome that encompassed his entire body and held steady for nearly a minute before he released it. Exhilarated but drained, Harry finally retired to bed, falling asleep almost instantly amid thoughts of foundations, board meetings, and magical possibilities. The Hogwarts Board of Governors consisted of 12 wizards and witches responsible for school oversight, policy decisions, and administrative review. They met quarterly in normal circumstances, but Harry's request for consultation about his eventual attendance had prompted a special session. "They're curious about you," Sirius explained as they approached the meeting room at the ministry where the board had convened. "The boy who lived who brought down Dumbledore's reputation and now seeks education at his school. Politically delicate, to say the least." Harry nodded, understanding the complexities. "That's why I wanted this meeting now, years before actual attendance. Clear the air, establish expectations, avoid surprises." Spoken like a true head of house, Amelia approved, accompanying them as Harry's legal liaison. The board members rose when Harry entered, a gesture of respect for his status rather than his age. Augusta Longbottom, who held a seat as proxy for House Longbottom, made introductions around the table. Most governors were cordial if reserved, offering formal greetings appropriate to a fellow aristocrat despite his youth. Only one face showed open hostility, Lucius Malfoy, whose cold grey eyes assessed Harry with undisguised contempt. "Lord Potter," Malfoy's voice dripped with minimal civility. "How progressive of the board to entertain educational consultations from 7-year-olds. 8, actually," Harry corrected politely, maintaining the composed demeanor Madame Blackwell had drilled into him. "And I believe preparation benefits all parties, especially given the unusual circumstances." This measured response earned approving nods from several governors, while Malfoy's expression soured further. Board Chairman Timothy Ogden, cousin to Tiberius from the Wisengamot prosecution, called the meeting to order. Lord Potter has requested this consultation regarding his future Hogwarts attendance. Given recent events involving Headmaster Dumbledore and Lord Potter's unique status, this seems prudent planning. Lord Potter, please share your concerns. Harry had prepared carefully for this moment. Thank you, Chairman. I wish to be clear that despite personal history with Headmaster Dumbledore, I value Hogwarts' educational tradition and hope to attend when age-appropriate. However, certain accommodations may be necessary given ongoing security concerns and my accelerated magical education. For the next 20 minutes, Harry outlined specific considerations, his current tutorial program that already covered early Hogwarts material, security protocols Gringotts and the DMLE recommended, and potential challenges arising from his public profile. I don't seek special treatment regarding academic standards, he emphasized. Only practical accommodations for unusual circumstances. My goal is normal educational experience to the extent possible. Most board members seemed receptive, asking thoughtful questions about his current magical progress, security needs, and expectations. Only Malfoy repeatedly inserted skeptical comments. Accommodation quickly becomes preferential treatment, he drawled during discussion of Harry's advanced study program. Hogwarts cannot adjust its thousand-year traditions for each student who claims accelerated ability. With respect, Governor Malfoy, Harry responded evenly, I'm not suggesting curriculum changes for the school. I'm inquiring whether existing mechanisms like OWL level testing might be available earlier than 5th year if a student demonstrates readiness. An excellent question, Professor Vector, who taught arithmancy at Hogwarts, interjected. While uncommon, there is precedent for accelerated examination in exceptional cases. Albus himself took certain newts 2 years early. This historical reference to Dumbledore effectively countered Malfoy's objection, causing his pale features to tighten with annoyance. The meeting continued productively until discussion turned to Harry's security, specifically, whether Dumbledore's probationary status affected student safety protocols. The headmaster's judgment regarding the boy who lived has been legally questioned, Sirius pointed out. Given history, additional oversight seems prudent when Harry eventually attends. Are you suggesting Dumbledore presents a danger? Malfoy asked silkily. How quickly allies become enemies in politics. I suggest nothing about current dangers, Sirius replied sharply. Only that past errors justify future caution. Perhaps Lord Malfoy's reluctance reflects different priorities, Augusta commented, her expression deceptively mild. Not all families opposed Voldemort's methods with equal vigor. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Malfoy's face drained of what little color it possessed. Careful, Madame Longbottom, he said softly. Unfounded insinuations about cleared Death Eater investigations invite legal response. As do implied threats against Wisengamot members, she countered. Chairman Ogden intervened before tensions escalated further. Let's return to educational matters. Lord Potter's security concerns are noted and will be addressed through appropriate channels closer to his enrollment date. The meeting concluded with general agreement that Harry's eventual Hogwarts attendance would include quarterly progress reviews, security protocols approved by both the board and DMLE, and consideration of accelerated testing if warranted by academic performance. As they prepared to leave, Malfoy approached Harry directly, positioning himself to speak without others overhearing. Impressive political maneuvering for one so young, he said, voice barely above a whisper. But remember, Potter, not all power is visible in Wisengamot votes or board meetings. The old ways have endured for reasons beyond politics, and those who upset ancient balances often find unexpected consequences. Before Harry could respond, Malfoy turned smoothly away, bidding formal farewells to other governors. What did he say to you? Sirius demanded as they left the ministry. Harry repeated Malfoy's words verbatim, having developed excellent recall during his months of political and legal education. Thinly veiled threat, Amelia concluded grimly. Typical Lucius, nothing actionable, but message clear. He's not the only former Death Eater growing bolder, Sirius said. My contacts report increased activity among certain families, the Knots, Crabs, Goyles. Nothing overtly illegal, just networking. Re-establishing old connections. They're responding to Dumbledore's diminished position, Amelia theorized. His fall creates vacuum in the power structure they're eager to exploit. Harry absorbed this analysis silently. Despite his youth, he'd learned quickly that wizarding politics extended far beyond formal government. Ancient families, blood prejudices, and lingering war loyalties created complex undercurrents beneath visible institutions. Does this change our plans? He asked finally. It means we proceed cautiously, Amelia replied. Dumbledore's trial victory was necessary but creates secondary challenges. Elements sympathetic to Voldemort's ideology may feel emboldened with Dumbledore weakened. Which is precisely why we continue building our own network, Sirius added. The Foundation launch next month brings together progressive families. The Longbottom Alliance strengthens traditional support. Your friendship group connects you to the next generation of different factions. This strategic approach to even childhood friendships occasionally troubled Harry. While he genuinely liked Neville, Hermione, and his other friends, the calculated political advantages adults identified in these relationships sometimes made him uncomfortable. Can't some things just be normal? He asked as they arrived at Potter Manor. Friendships without political analysis, school without security protocols. Sirius's expression softened. I wish they could be, pup. But normal wasn't an option from the moment Voldemort targeted your family. The sobering truth hung between them. Harry's life had never been ordinary and never would be, not as the boy who lived, not as head of House Potter, not as the child prophesied to vanquish a Dark Lord. I understand, he said finally. I just sometimes wonder what it would be like. Balance is possible, Amelia suggested gently. Political awareness needn't eliminate genuine connection. Your friendship with Hermione began strategically but has become authentic. Same with Neville and the others. This perspective helped. After Amelia departed, Harry spent the afternoon with Sirius planning the Lily Potter Foundation launch, a project that blended political necessity with genuine passion for helping children like himself. The foundation building renovation in Diagon Alley finishes next week, Sirius reported, reviewing architectural plans. Ground floor for public access, offices above, resident spaces for emergency placements on the top floors. And the outreach program for early identified Muggleborns? Harry asked. Framework approved by the Ministry Education Office. Hermione's officially our first success story and unofficial consultant. Sirius grinned. That girl's ideas about integrating Muggle educational methods with magical theory are revolutionary, terrifying some of the old guard. Harry smiled, imagining Hermione's enthusiastic presentations to stodgy ministry officials. Her perspective as a brilliant Muggle-born child had proven invaluable in designing programs that would help others like her navigate the magical world earlier and more successfully. That evening, Harry received an unexpected owl, a brief note from Dumbledore, his first direct communication since the trial concluded. Lord Potter, though circumstances prevent personal congratulations on your emancipation, I wish to express sincere hopes for your successful transition into your family's legacy. The Potter line has historically balanced progress with tradition, a rare and valuable approach in our sometimes rigid society. Should you ever wish historical context about your parents or family magic that others cannot provide, my knowledge remains at your disposal despite our complicated history. Respectfully, Albus Dumbledore Hogwarts headmaster. The note's measured tone and careful wording revealed much about Dumbledore's current strategy, acknowledgement of Harry's new status, subtle reminder of his historical knowledge, positioning himself as a potential resource rather than adversary. Harry showed the note to Sirius, who snorted. Typical Albus. Never misses an opportunity to maneuver, even after a courtroom defeat. Should I respond? Harry asked. Briefly and formally, Sirius advised. Acknowledge receipt, express appropriate thanks for well wishes, make no commitments. Harry composed a polite but distant reply, the expected aristocratic response to a fallen but still significant figure. The political dance continued, even in simple correspondence. The following weeks passed in whirlwind activity as Harry balanced magical education with preparations for the Lily Potter Foundation launch. His tutors reported unprecedented progress in practical magic following the inheritance ritual, with particular advancement in defensive spells, transfiguration, and charms. Your shield charm would satisfy OWL requirements already, Professor Whitwick declared after one particularly impressive demonstration. And your animation charms show remarkable precision for your age. Beyond academics, Harry's political education continued through practical experience. He attended his first Wisengamot session as recognized head of House Potter, though Augusta would continue voting his proxy until he turned 15. The political body's dynamics had shifted noticeably following Dumbledore's trial, traditional factions realigning, progressive elements gaining confidence, old guard demonstrating uncertainty in this new landscape. Most significantly, Harry established weekend residence rotation between Potter Manor and Sirius's newly renovated Grimmauld Place, an arrangement that provided his first experience of genuine family life. Though neither location could be called ordinary households, the routine of shared meals, casual conversation, and even occasional disputes about bedtime created normalcy Harry had never known at the Dursleys. "You've got your mother's stubborn streak," Sirius complained good-naturedly after Harry successfully argued for extended reading time one evening. James would have just sneaked the book after lights out. These glimpses into his parents' personalities through Sirius's stories proved more valuable than any inheritance. Harry collected them eagerly, building mental portraits of the people he couldn't remember but increasingly felt connected to. The Lily Potter Foundation launch occurred on a sunny April morning, exactly 9 months after Harry's discovery by Gringotts. The renovated building in Diagon Alley, a stately structure with large windows and a welcoming facade, attracted substantial crowd and media attention. Harry, dressed in formal Potter robes with his head of house ring visible, delivered a brief speech he prepared with Hermione's help. "My mother, Lily Potter, believed magic belonged to everyone fortunate enough to possess it, regardless of family background, wealth, or connections. She was Muggle-born, like many talented witches and wizards who enrich our world with fresh perspectives. This foundation honors her belief by supporting magical children who lack traditional advantages, orphans like myself, Muggle-borns discovering magic without guidance, and families struggling to provide magical education. We cannot create perfect childhoods, but we can ensure every magical child receives the knowledge, support, and respect they deserve." The speech received enthusiastic response, particularly from younger wizarding families and Muggle-born advocates. Even the Daily Prophet, which had maintained complex coverage of Harry since Dumbledore's trial, reported favorably on the Foundation's mission and Harry's remarkable poise for his tender years. Less publicly visible but equally significant was the Foundation's board composition, strategically balanced between traditional and progressive elements, with representatives from multiple Wisengamot factions. Augusta Longbottom provided old family credibility, Andromeda Tonks, née Black, represented reformed traditionalists, Arthur Weasley brought ministry connections despite limited wealth, and Emma Granger offered Muggle parent perspective. Amelia Bones served as legal advisor, while Ragnarok appointed a Goblin liaison for financial oversight. This diverse leadership demonstrated Harry's growing political acumen, building coalition that transcended traditional wizarding divisions while pursuing genuinely beneficial social aims. Following the Foundation launch, Harry's schedule included another significant event, Sirius Black's formal reinstatement ceremony at the Ministry. After medical recovery, psychological healing, and legal restoration of rights, Sirius received official Ministry apology and compensation for wrongful imprisonment. More importantly for Harry, he accepted appointment as voting proxy for the Black family Wisengamot seat, creating another political ally in Harry's growing influence network. "The Black family magic always recognized me as heir despite my mother's disowning," Sirius explained after his own inheritance ritual. "Now I can redirect centuries of dark influence toward more productive purposes, starting with supporting my godson's initiatives." By early May, 9 months after Harry's discovery by Steelclaw, the wizarding world had adapted to new realities, Dumbledore diminished but not destroyed, continuing as Hogwarts headmaster under restrictions, Harry established as legitimate political figure despite his youth, and power realignments creating opportunities for both progressive reforms and traditional resurgence. For Harry personally, the transformation remained most visible in small moments, confidently performing magic that would challenge older students, articulating political positions in Wisengamot committee hearings, managing Foundation resources with growing financial acumen, and most importantly, building genuine friendships with peers who saw beyond his boy-who-lived status. His regular study group, now expanded to include additional children from various backgrounds, provided both educational advancement and social development. Neville had blossomed with proper wand matching and confidence building, Hermione channeled her intellectual intensity into innovative magical theory, Susan Bones brought practical DMLE perspectives from her aunt, Ron Weasley contributed strategic thinking and wizard-raised insights, and newer additions like Blaise Zabini and Daphne Greengrass provided traditional pureblood viewpoints without blood supremacist ideology. "You've created quite the coalition," Amelia observed after observing one particularly productive study session. Future Hogwarts houses working together years before attendance. This observation pleased Harry enormously. While never explicitly discussed, he recognized the potential long-term benefits of cross-house friendship foundations built before Hogwarts sorting could create artificial divisions. In late May, approaching the one-year anniversary of his discovery, Harry received unexpected correspondence from Gringotts requesting urgent meeting with Director Ragnarok. The formal parchment provided no details but emphasized confidentiality and importance. Harry and Sirius arrived at Gringotts the following morning, bypassing public banking areas for Ragnarok's private office. The director greeted them with unusual formality, even by Goblin standards. "Lord Potter," he began once privacy wards activated, "the Goblin nation wishes to recognize extraordinary circumstances of our alliance. In 900 years of wizard-goblin relations, no case exists parallel to yours, a wizard child whose rights were defended by Goblin intervention, leading to significant wizarding political realignment." Harry exchanged puzzled glances with Sirius, uncertain where this led. "The Goblin High Council has deliberated extensively," Ragnarok continued. "By unanimous decision, unprecedented in 7 centuries, you are hereby recognized as friend of the Goblin nation, only the third wizard granted this status in recorded history." The significance wasn't immediately apparent to Harry, but Sirius's sharp intake of breath indicated major importance. "Director Ragnarok," Sirius said carefully, "this honor hasn't been bestowed since Gringotts himself named Livius Potter friend in 1482. "Livius Potter?" Harry asked. "My ancestor. Who negotiated the Great Accord ending the Goblin Rebellion," Ragnarok confirmed. Before him, only Merlin held this distinction. The title carries both honor and practical implications, preferential banking terms, access to Goblin-made items normally restricted to our kind, and most significantly, permission to call upon Goblin assistance in times of genuine need. Harry understood now why Sirius looked stunned. Wizarding history depicted goblins as fierce, independent, and reluctant to involve themselves in human affairs beyond strict business arrangements. This designation represented extraordinary departure from centuries of practiced neutrality. "I'm deeply honored," Harry said sincerely. "May I ask what prompted this decision?" Ragnarok's expression grew serious. "The Goblin nation observes patterns invisible to most wizards. Ancient magics stir. Dark forces gather slowly but purposefully. The one who targeted your family has not truly departed, merely waits in diminished form." This confirmation of Dumbledore's cryptic warning sent chill through Harry. Despite political differences, both Dumbledore and the Goblins foresaw future conflicts centered around Voldemort's potential return. "The blood that found you that day in the Muggle playground," Ragnarok continued. "It recognized something beyond ordinary magic, a destiny intertwined with forces greater than individual wizards or goblins. The nation believes balance between our peoples serves mutual interest against greater threats." The formal ceremony that followed included ancient goblin rituals, magical oaths of mutual respect, not servitude, and presentation of a small platinum key unlike standard vault keys. This opens no specific vault, Ragnarok explained, but rather signifies right to request goblin crafting of one significant item during your lifetime, a weapon, armor, or magical object crafted with arts normally reserved for goblin use only. The implications of such privilege, goblin metalwork being legendary for magical properties unavailable in wizard-crafted items, underscored the honor's significance. When they departed Gringotts, Sirius remained uncharacteristically quiet until they reached Potter Manor's security. That, he finally said, was possibly the most significant political development since Dumbledore's trial. Goblin alliance, even limited, changes everything. But why me? Harry asked, the question that had lingered throughout the ceremony. I'm just a kid who got lucky when Steelclaw noticed me. Sirius's expression turned serious. The goblins see something in you, Harry, something beyond ordinary magic or politics. They've positioned themselves as allies before whatever conflict they believe is coming. This sobering assessment followed Harry into the following days. Between Foundation responsibilities, magical training, and political obligations, he found himself increasingly contemplating larger questions: why Voldemort had targeted his family specifically, what ancient magic stirred, and what role he might play in conflicts yet to come. His contemplative mood persisted until Sirius announced surprise birthday celebration, not for Harry's actual birthday still months away, but marking 1 year since his discovery and introduction to the magical world. Your real rebirth into wizarding society, Sirius explained, organizing gathering at Potter Manor that included all Harry's growing circle, study group friends, Foundation board members, political allies, and educational mentors. The celebration provided perfect counterbalance to Harry's recent gravity. Watching his friends enjoy Potter Manor's grounds, playing modified Quidditch, exploring the hedge maze, swimming in the enchanted pool, reminded him that despite responsibilities and prophecies, he remained fundamentally an 8-year-old boy with his life before him. Quite the change from last summer, Hermione commented as they took break from swimming. Remember when you just learned magic existed? Sometimes feels like another lifetime, Harry admitted. Hard to believe it's only been a year. You've done more in 1 year than most wizards do in 10, she said thoughtfully. Founded a charity, testified in major trial, became head of house, befriended the goblins. Don't remind me, Harry groaned. Makes me tired just thinking about it. But good tired, right? She pressed. Not Dursley tired. Harry considered this distinction. Definitely good tired. The kind that comes from doing things that matter. This sentiment captured his journey perfectly. The exhaustion of endless chores for uncaring relatives had been replaced by purposeful activity building something meaningful, not just for himself, but for others who might otherwise face similar challenges. That evening, after guests departed, Harry retreated to his practice room for nightly magical exercises. The training wand had been replaced months ago with his permanent wand from Ollivanders, Holly and Phoenix Feather, 11 inches, which the wand maker had called Curious before explaining its brother core belonged to Voldemort himself. This connection had initially disturbed Harry, but he'd come to view it as symbolic, his magic linked to his destined opponent, perhaps necessary for eventual confrontation both Dumbledore and the goblins predicted. Tonight, feeling particularly focused after the day's celebration, Harry attempted the spell he'd been working toward for months, the Patronus charm that Professor Whitwick believed might be within his capability despite its advanced nature. The key lies not in magical power, which you possess in abundance, the elderly professor had explained, but emotional focus, genuine happiness powerful enough to counter darkness. Harry had struggled with this requirement. Despite his improved circumstances, truly happy memories remained limited compared to most children his age. But today, watching his friends enjoy themselves in his home, feeling Sirius's pride, receiving Neville's genuine friendship and Hermione's fierce loyalty, those moments created something new and powerful within him. Expecto Patronum, he incanted, focusing on those feelings while executing precise wand movement. Silver mist emerged from his wand tip, stronger than previous attempts but still formless. Harry concentrated harder, drawing deeper on the day's emotions, adding memories of Sirius's stories about his parents, his grandparents' portraits pride, Ragnar's respect. Expecto Patronum. The silver mist coalesced, solidifying into four-legged form that bounded around the practice room, a magnificent stag with branching antlers, glowing with inner light that illuminated the entire space. Harry stared in wonder, instinctively knowing the significance without being told. His father's animagus form, Prongs, as Sirius called him, manifested through Harry's magic as guardian and protector. The stag circled him once before dissipating, leaving Harry emotionally overwhelmed but exhilarated. He'd performed magic most adult wizards couldn't master, connected with his father's legacy in profound way, and demonstrated the emotional healing that had begun despite years of deadly damage. When Professor Whitwick arrived for morning lessons and heard about the achievement, he insisted on witnessing it personally. Remarkable, he breathed after Harry successfully produced the stag again. Not merely the magical accomplishment, though that's extraordinary for your age, but the form itself. Patron uses often reflect fundamental character or significant emotional connections. It's my dad's animagus form, Harry explained. Though I never saw it myself. Magic recognizes bonds beyond conscious memory, Whitwick said softly. Your father's protection manifests still. This interpretation resonated deeply with Harry. Though orphaned as infant, he wasn't truly alone, his parents' love, magic, and protection remained, accessible through his own developing powers and the connections he'd built since discovery. In the year's final Wisengamot session before summer recess, Harry attended as observer while Augusta continued voting his proxy. The political dynamics had stabilized somewhat after months of post-Dumbledore adjustment, with three distinct factions emerging: traditionalists led by Lucius Malfoy, progressives organized around Amelia Bones and Arthur Weasley, and centrists navigating between extremes. What fascinated Harry was how his own network crossed these divisions, Augusta representing traditional values without blood supremacy, Sirius bringing reformed black influence to progressive causes, and various Foundation connections creating bridges between typically opposed factions. You're becoming quite the political force, Augusta observed as they left the chamber. Not through direct voting yet, but influence networks forming around your initiatives. This assessment, while gratifying, reminded Harry of responsibilities beyond his years. As they passed the minister's offices, he noticed Lucius Malfoy in deep conversation with Minister Fudge, their expressions suggesting serious discussion beyond routine politics. Malfoy spotted Harry and paused mid-sentence, offering cold nod before deliberately turning his back to continue private conversation. The dismissal was calculated insult, acknowledging Harry's technical status while emphasizing his youth and perceived insignificance. Don't let him provoke you, Augusta murmured as they continued walking. Malfoy tests reactions, seeking weaknesses. I'm not provoked, Harry assured her. Just observing. Indeed, Harry had learned valuable lessons about wizarding politics over the past year. Public confrontations rarely benefited either party, true power operated through alliances, information, and strategic positioning rather than dramatic showdowns. Even Dumbledore's trial, while publicly sensational, represented culmination of months of careful evidence gathering and political alignment. By the time Harry returned to Potter Manor that evening, he felt oddly contemplative, reviewing mental snapshots of the year's journey from cupboard dweller to recognized political figure, from magic-ignorant child to accomplished young wizard, from isolated orphan to center of growing support network. He settled in his favorite window seat overlooking the manor grounds, Hedwig perched beside him as he absently stroked her feathers. The snowy owl had been among his first magical possessions and remained favorite companion during quiet moments. Quite a year, Hedwig, he mused aloud. Wonder what the next one brings. As if answering, Hedwig gave soft hoot and nudged his hand affectionately. You're right, Harry smiled. Whatever comes, we're better prepared than before. This simple truth provided perfect conclusion to his reflections. The frightened, malnourished boy from Privet Drive had transformed into something new, not yet fully grown, but strengthened by knowledge, magic, resources, and most importantly, genuine connections to people who valued him for himself, not merely his boy-who-lived status. Harry turned from the window, heading to his desk where Foundation proposals awaited review, transfiguration theory needed study, and correspondence from international allies required responses. The work continued, building toward whatever future lay ahead, whether Voldemort's prophesied return or simply his own continued growth into the wizard he was meant to become. The cupboard was far behind him now. Ahead lay challenges certainly, but also possibilities beyond anything he could have imagined that day in the playground when a disguised goblin noticed his accidental magic and changed everything. Epilogue. 3 years later, Platform 9 3/4 buzzed with typical September 1st chaos, tearful parents, excited children, hooting owls, and the gleaming Hogwarts Express belching steam as it prepared for departure. Among the crowd, Harry Potter attracted attention despite attempts at discretion. At 11, he stood taller than most first years, his confident posture and custom robes marking him as much as the lightning scar partially visible through carefully styled hair. "Remember what we discussed," Sirius said, adjusting Harry's collar unnecessarily, a gesture of affection disguised as practical assistance. "Professor McGonagall expects you in her office before the feast to discuss your modified curriculum." "And Dumbledore?" Harry asked quietly. "Will maintain appropriate professional distance," Amelia Bones replied firmly, joining their conversation. "The supervision protocols remain active despite his probation ending last year." Harry nodded, having expected nothing less. His relationship with the headmaster had evolved into cautious mutual respect over 4 years, never friendly, but acknowledging shared concerns about Voldemort's eventual return despite disagreements about methods and preparations. "Susan's already found a compartment with Hannah," Amelia continued, nodding toward the train. "Neville arrived early with Augusta, and the Grangers dropped Hermione off 20 minutes ago, punctual as always. And Ron's family is." Sirius gestured toward the unmistakable cluster of redheads arriving in typical Weasley last-minute fashion. Harry smiled, anticipating reunion with his study group friends. Though they'd maintained regular contact through Foundation activities and social gatherings, attending Hogwarts together represented a new chapter in their relationships. His modified attendance had been negotiated meticulously, standard classes where appropriate, accelerated options where testing demonstrated readiness, and special arrangements for his continuing obligations as head of House Potter and Lily Potter Foundation chairman. "Lord Potter." A silky voice interrupted Harry's thoughts. Draco Malfoy stood nearby with his parents, the young heir's expression betraying mixture of disdain and curiosity. Unlike Harry's other yearmates, Draco had never joined the study group, maintaining distance mandated by his father's political opposition. "Heir Malfoy," Harry replied with precise formality. "Looking forward to term." "Naturally," Draco answered coolly. "Though some of us attended proper preparatory academies rather than alternative arrangements." The implied criticism of Harry's tutoring program rolled off easily after years of navigating similar political barbs. "Different paths to the same destination," he replied mildly. "I look forward to seeing where each approach proves most effective." Lucius Malfoy's lips thinned at this diplomatic response that nonetheless suggested academic competition his son might not win. "Come, Draco. Your mother wishes to give final instructions before departure." After they moved away, Sirius chuckled softly. "Still can't resist needling the Malfoys, can you?" "Merely maintaining appropriate diplomatic relations," Harry replied innocently, making Amelia laugh. "You've learned political navigation too well," she said. "Sometimes I forget you're only 11. This observation, while accurate, overlooked crucial developments. While Harry's external responsibilities had certainly accelerated his maturity, his guardians had worked diligently to ensure normal childhood experiences alongside political education, Quidditch with the Weasleys, cinema outings with the Grangers, exploration of both magical and Muggle cultural experiences. The train whistle blew final warning. Harry hugged Sirius tightly, then accepted Amelia's more formal embrace. "Letters twice weekly," Sirius reminded unnecessarily. "And remember you can fly home weekends if needed." "I'll be fine," Harry assured him. "We've planned for everything." Indeed they had. For years of preparation, strategic relationship building, educational advancement, and political positioning had transformed Harry's Hogwarts prospects completely. Rather than arriving ignorant and isolated as Dumbledore had originally intended, he entered with knowledge, connections, resources, and protection networks extending far beyond school walls. As Harry boarded the train, finding the compartment where his friends waited, he reflected on the extraordinary journey begun that day in Little Whinging Playground. A goblin's chance observation, a blood test's shocking revelations, and the courage to demand justice had altered not just his life but potentially the entire wizarding world's trajectory. The train lurched forward, beginning its journey toward Hogwarts. Harry settled beside his friends, Hermione already discussing class syllabi, Ron speculating about Quidditch prospects, Neville showing off his latest plant specimen, and Susan sharing ministry gossip from her aunt. Whatever challenges awaited at Hogwarts, house sorting that might separate them, professors with complex political allegiances, Dumbledore's continued presence, and the looming prophecy both goblins and the headmaster believed would eventually manifest, Harry faced them from a position of unprecedented strength. The frightened boy in the cupboard had become something entirely new, Lord Potter, friend of the Goblin Nation, magical prodigy, and center of political networks spanning traditional divisions. All because one day, a Goblin Nation blood test revealed not just theft of gold, but theft of destiny itself, a destiny now reclaimed and redirected toward possibilities even Dumbledore hadn't imagined. Harry smiled as the train picked up speed, carrying him toward the next chapter in his extraordinary life. The cupboard was behind him. The future, finally, was his to shape. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.